And let's try like this. There's Jean-Francois. Okay, let's do it, everybody. Welcome back. Happy Thursday, September 2nd. The biggest story at this very moment is from Apple, which is, I've heard of this company before. Apparently, there's some news about this company, Apple. Apparently, they make phones and stuff. Apple themselves say they will let developers of Reader apps worldwide link to a website to set up or manage accounts early next year, closing an antitrust investigation with Japan. And I can hear what you're thinking right now. You're thinking, what is a Reader app? And a Reader app is an app where people consume content, basically. So Spotify would count as that. Netflix would count for that. Audible, or any place where you pay for content, basically inside of an app. So,
but consuming it off the site, that's one of the characteristics of what they call a Reader app.
mm-hmm.
That you could consume it off the site.
Mm-hmm. So Apple will let developers of Reader apps worldwide, and this is being inspired by an antitrust investigation in a court in Japan, and to settle the suit, so that there doesn't need to be an official ruling, Apple has proposed, well, how about we just let all of these Reader apps be able to link out to a website so that these apps, developers of these Reader apps, will be able to manage the accounts of those people who are trying to sign up for their services. And so that's where it's at. This Mark Gurman from Bloomberg says this is what you get when trying to sign up for Netflix on the iPhone today. In early 2022, it'll be a button that points you to Netflix website to sign up and pay there. This is a major structural change that will save Apple a lot of scrutiny. And there's a photo of what he's talking about where it says this is what you see today. And what you see today is trying to join Netflix. You can't sign up for Netflix inside of the App Store. We know it's a hassle. After you're a member, you can start watching. And so you have to sign up outside. And you're not currently today, they're not able to even link you to where you're supposed to sign up. And now they will be able to. And that's kind of the big notable change underfoot here. And Reuters says they have sources that Apple is facing an antitrust investigation in India over forcing developers to use its in-app payment systems. Did I not say this was going to happen 24 hours ago? I did say. Did I not? Yes. And did I not say India would likely be next? Lakeisha?
Yes.
If you're looking for testifying, yeah, you did say that.
I did say this was going to happen in 24 hours. And I did say India is likely to be the next. And here's India fulfilling the prophecy yet again. Breaking news since we met last time from Reuters. They have sources. Apple is facing antitrust investigation in India over forcing developers to use its in-app payment system. Just like the court case that just got settled. The antitrust case in the U.S. And they basically settled it by allowing apps, apps in America, to circumvent the App Store and do have their own payment directly with the users. And I said, watch out, other countries are going to see that and instantly want to jump on that. And here we go. And I said India is likely to be very fast on that because they're going to want that for their Indian apps, for their entrepreneurs. And damn right they're going to want that. And here it is, about 24 hours later, not even 48 hours later. Apple hit with antitrust case in India over. Boy, India is not screwing around. And this is why I say when something happens in one country, the other countries are watching and thinking to themselves, shit, why didn't we think of that? And I said, Korea is going to think this. India of all is going to think this to themselves because India is really looking out for their own apps. And that's what brought that thought to my head. And here it is. Apple is facing antitrust challenge in India for allegedly abusing its dominant position in the app marketplace by forcing developers to use its proprietary in-app purchase system, according to a source and documents seen by Reuters. The allegations are similar to a case Apple faces in the EU, where regulators last year started an investigation into Apple's imposition of an in-app fee of 30% for distribution of paid digital content and other restrictions. The Indian case was filed by a little-known nonprofit group which urges Apple's fee of up to 30% hurts competition by raising costs for app developers and consumers and customers, while also acting as a barrier to market entry. The existence of the 30% commission means that some app developers will never make it to the market. This could also result in consumer harm, said the filing, which has been seen by Reuters. Unlike Indian court cases, filings and details of cases reviewed by the Competition Commission of India are not made public. Apple and the Competition Commission of India did not respond to the request for comment. In the coming weeks, the CCI will review the case and could order its investigation arm to conduct a wider probe or dismiss it altogether if it finds no merit in it, which they won't do because Apple's already agreed to settle this in the U.S., said a source familiar with the matter. There are high chances that an investigation can be ordered, also because the EU has been probing this. Yeah, no shit, said the person who declined to be identified as the case details are not public. The complaint nonprofit called Together We Fight Society. Wow, what a great! It's like fucking Rage Against the Machine. Has a nonprofit in India. Together We Fight Society, which is that would be a great name for a punk rock band, wouldn't it? Which is
I was going to say that's a freaking great name.
Yeah, it's a great name for a fucking group. Which is based in India's western state of Rajasthan, told Reuters in a statement it filed the case in the interest of protecting Indian consumers and startups. Yep, told you. India cares about its startups. Why are we paying this American company 30% of all of our profits? F that. F that. Oh, and so what happened in America? Apple is going to let people have their own direct way of paying. We want that. Hello. Anyone else want that? And you hear a crowd of 1 billion Indians saying, fuck Apple, as soon as they say that. And then this gets put into the court system right away, lickety split. In India, though Apple's iOS powered just about 2% of the 520 million smartphones by the end of 2020, with the rest using Android. Counterpoint Research says the U.S. firm's smartphone base in the country has more than doubled in the last 5 years. The Apple case in India comes just as Korea's parliament this week approved a bill that bans major app store operators like Apple and Google from forcing software developers to use their payment system. That's actually what it was. It was right on the heel of the South Korean case, which was either yesterday or the day before. What's today? Thursday? Was it Tuesday? 2 days ago? 2 days ago. South Korea passed it, and that's when I said India will be
Tuesday,
next. Yeah. And the question is, who's going to be next after India? It's going to be Russia's going to try this right away. The EU now has no choice but to push full steam on this. Apple's screwed. It's going to be a series of dominoes. And
you know what? I just thought about it. Is this Japan antitrust thing, the one that they just got away with the reader app? Probably they still feel it's lucky because Japan didn't insist on them allowing another payment route. So maybe it's a good deal for them after all.
So,
hey, Tyler, this is Vinay.
Hey, Vinay.
So on this Apple thing, this is big news here because, the IT rules that were passed with all the data protection,
Yes.
The Twitter and all of that. So it's gone to the Supreme Court, and I just tweeted you an article, and the Supreme Court's actually going to be hearing this in a few days. And right now, Supreme Court's actually just 7 hours ago said something about Facebook, YouTube, but very, very interesting reading. So looks like a lot of these. There's going to be a lot of shit happening.
Vinay, my read is this organization, they spin up like in last month. I think CCI actually wanted to get wound around these firms together for quite long. So if you the same article which Tyler was reading, if you read it below, what it says is that even if the companies improve their current behavior, CCI would look into their past history. So even if this 30% cut get resolved, CCI gonna look into all of their past any antitrust thing. So it was just a hook. So this in-app purchase is just a hook. It's a bigger plan to round these companies together. And this and yeah, so this NGO which you're talking about never existed before. It came up like a couple of months back.
Yeah,
Maybe a bunch of lawyers put it together.
yeah, absolutely, Amish, agree with you. And the only spanner in the works potentially is if the Supreme Court comes in and rules that some of the uh, uh, rules of the IT Act are null and void, right? So if that happens, then all of these are screwed. But that's potentially something that is going to get very interesting in the next 2 to 3 days. So stay tuned, folks.
Hey,
Yep.
Tyler,
Yeah.
I'm more amazed that all of this hasn't impacted Apple stock yet. I mean, Apple stock actually rose slightly yesterday because of the news of the Apple Watch with the blood pressure and stuff.
Yeah.
That's what the market was focused on, not this stuff, which is amazing because this is a significant revenue stream for them. Very
No,
significant.
because these news are from Asia, so the American investor have not catch up with it yet.
Well, funny enough, the South Korean store, yeah, is a bit. India, like you said, is 2%. They have 2% market share of smartphones in India. I think just we'll see. I think it just Wall Street doesn't quite value the internet. News from South Korea doesn't really ring bells for American
They should
investors.
interpret that it's going to spread to North America.
Yeah, of course it will. Yeah, well, this is your
Ken,
opportunity. Do a little
Ken,
short.
this is it.
How long
Don't
will
you
it take for this to pass? In the EU and the
This
US, this is the problem. Is the US and EU legal, political systems just take fucking forever with this shit. It's just unbearably slow.
It's a tide, though,
I
Ken.
would
That's
say also
I'm trying to
you
ping
said
in my friend Tariq Krim, who
Yes.
was just in for a minute,
Yes.
but he's a really big tech guy
Yes.
based in Paris.
Yes.
So I just pinged him.
Oh,
He
good.
was in for like a hot second, and I just sent him a DM.
We're old buddies.
Yeah,
Ken,
me too. Awesome.
the
Okay,
reason
I'm
why I
gonna try to
don't
bring him
think
in.
the reason why I don't think it's had an impact on Apple stock particularly is this is a sector-wide thing. Like everybody's going to be affected by it. It's not just Apple. So there's no relative loss of Apple versus Google or anybody else in this category.
The domino just started.
Yeah.
Hey,
So
my
I'm gonna,
guess,
but I was wondering like the Apple
Apple
Watch
bigger part of it.
he's talking. Yeah, they said the Apple Watch wasn't going to be ready, or that's the news that I remember hearing in here. So on time at least. So the news of the Apple Watch rising for the stock rising just is kind of a bit a mismatch when this is bigger news technically if you think about it globally.
Well, it's going to be very interesting to watch how this all unfolds with the way that countries are now watching each other, with the way they get these little regional victories over tech companies. The other's true too. I mean, India's clearly saw what happened in South Korea, and other countries saw what happened in India, where India was able to force these big tech companies to bend to their political will and force out content moderation, do jump through all kinds of hoops that it wasn't obvious they would jump through. And now it's known they will jump through them if your market is big enough. The question is your country big enough? I would say Indonesia is likely big enough. Indonesia is a huge market. Japan's a very big market. Japan's a huge market for tech. And America could do it all day long. The problem is just the legal political structure machinery is so rusty and slow, and the appeals and that whole process just drags everything out endlessly to the benefit of the big tech companies in this case. But Russia's trying it, but on this issue of copying India to make them open offices on the ground and have enforcement officers on the ground that are physically accountable and responsible. But so far, the tech companies aren't doing it. None of them. And so now they're being found guilty by not complying, and they have to pay these fines. And they're just not going to do it. And they probably won't even pay the fines. And then eventually Russia's going to have to say, okay, we're kicking you out. And they're going to say, who cares? The economy of Russia is actually way smaller than Italy. You're not a player. Vladdy. Hey, Vlad, you're not a player.
So Tyler,
yeah.
So Tyler, you were talking about the EU. Did you guys report in the morning? I mean, I missed that room about the EU fine on WhatsApp.
Here it is. I have it right here. That's actually the second biggest story.
Yeah.
It's Ireland, actually. Ireland's Data Protection Commission, on behalf of the EU, so fair enough, EU, finds WhatsApp 225 million euros, so about $250 million for privacy violations, the second largest under GDPR. WhatsApp, of course, will appeal, as said twice already in the past 5 minutes. The legal process through the appeal system and through the EU, it's okay. Well, they'll figure this all out in the next 5 years. Regulators say the chat service unit failed to disclose fully how it collected and shared data about its users. And that's one thing that the EU is very particular about, is the data of citizens and how that data is managed and used. So, not a surprise to see a Facebook property being fined by the EU, because one of those two is very careful about user data. The other is very uncareful about user data. So perhaps not a surprise that this is unfolding for Facebook companies in the EU. And my buddy Mark made a few comments here. Here's what happened. Europe's other privacy regulators said Ireland hadn't done a good enough job. They added additional reasons about WhatsApp falling foul of Europe's privacy rules. And importantly, they added this in terms of size of fine. Reminder, Ireland originally asked for €50 million fine. Other watchdogs overruled them and quadrupled the fine. I'm no lawyer, but that's either a hit to the one-stop shop mechanism or a win for EU-wide privacy rules. Yeah, because Ireland doesn't want to penalize Facebook because Facebook has a huge fucking European campus based in Dublin. And Ireland doesn't want to piss off Facebook in Dublin. I mean, Facebook European headquarters is in Ireland. So Ireland, Ireland doesn't want to put a heavy fine on Facebook. Facebook employs a shit ton of people in Dublin. It's one of the big significant tech companies based in Ireland, in Dublin. So they don't want to antagonize them. So funny to see the EU say, no, let's 5x that fine. For me, this is the most important part. Europe's network of privacy regulators ordered Ireland to reassess and increase its proposed fine after objections to the original penalty from the 8 other EU regulators. Yeah, Ireland's like, fuck it, let them do what they want to do. And the EU's like, no. So now they're hit with a €225 million fine, which is about $267 million fine for breaching Europe's GDPR. And the Irish Times version of the headline says, grave findings for WhatsApp as regulatory backlash against tech giants gathers pace. Okay, next headline is from The Verge and many others, but the Verge version says, Twitter launches super followers for iOS, letting select groups of US test user charge either $2.99, $4.99, or $9.99 per month for their tweets. And my friend Jane Wong from Hong Kong has already set up her super followers and has already done a tweet to show she's already got people paying for her super followers. So I'm going to ping her in because she sent out a really interesting tweet about what it looks like when people pay you, when a super follower follows you. Why does it say her account doesn't exist? What did I do wrong there? Hold on. That basically you only get to see the first 5 or so people who sign up. And then because of the way the accounting records focus, I will retweet this now so you see what I'm saying. She says, each super follow is an in-app purchase on the Apple App Store. But because there's too many in-app purchases for the Twitter app, the App Store only shows the first 10 each month. So you only get to see the names of the Twitter accounts of the first 10 followers you get each month because it cuts it off at 10 because of the way they do their accounting or whatever. So it's kind of screwed up. So, copy link to tweet. I will tweet this out so you see what I mean. And I did ping Jane to see if she'll pop in the room as she normally does, and we can talk about there. I just tweeted it out so you can see it for yourself. But in the near future, as we now know, Twitter won't have to use Apple's in-app purchase for the super follower feature. In fact, it appears they will allow Bitcoin payments because it was revealed about 24 hours ago that Twitter's claiming they're enabling tipping inside of Twitter through Bitcoin by using the Lightning Network. So you can, and the benefit of that is you can tip as small as you like, 2 pennies. It doesn't even have to be $1 or $2. It could be 1 cent, 2 cent, 3, 5, 6, 10 cents, whatever, what have you. And that's very interesting in and of itself. But the ability to pay for the super followers through Bitcoin gets very interesting because that turns it into an international thing very quickly. And they don't have to pay the Apple in-app purchases payment stuff. It's all, direct. So this is all going to get really interesting. All these things dovetail together simultaneously. It gets very interesting.
Tyler, I'm not sure if someone can clarify it. If these small tips start floating between nodes, wouldn't a Bitcoin network also become way more stronger and active compared to now, where most of the people are hodlers, which basically keep on, which is actually not good for the network itself. So, is there a possibility that it's a deliberate move to push the network, make the network more active and loaded?
Make the Lightning Network more active?
And of course,
Bitcoin
the underlying
transactions?
Bitcoin. Yeah.
That's a technical Bitcoin question that Ben would be best suited to answer.
Yep. And I think, Tyler, they're just adding the option for Bitcoin payment on top of the fiat payment.
I think they're going to do the whole thing I've been saying from the beginning, which is the wallet. They're going to create their own decentralized wallet, I think, is what they're going to have to do.
Tyler, this is our friend Jack's first step to transitioning it. This is his first step.
Okay, I'll read you the article then.
This is the way for him to be able to take the Twitter people that are on the platform to transition to even also his decentralized Blue Sky. Remember, he's going to start transitioning them over. So everyone could sit into the details, but the devil's not in the details. It's in the overarching strategy that he's moving it slowly. And people are looking at the minutia, but they need to be looking at the big helicopter view because he's moving people like indirectly by doing these little bits and bobs. And sure enough, then he's going to pull the trigger and it's all going to go over and people are like, oh my God, how fast did he do that? He didn't do it fast. He's doing it underneath our noses right now.
But it doesn't make business sense if you just
You're right.
only Bitcoin. But
it doesn't make not about business sense.
Yep.
Yeah. Neither does.
This is about a legacy.
Correct.
Yep.
And that might be why it's confusing to people, and that's why they're not seeing it coming. But by the way, Cheryl, neither does wearing a tie-dyed T-shirt and walking around without shoes as a billionaire. That doesn't make a lot of business sense either.
Yeah. Anyhow, it's up to him. But I think it will be an option. That means the users will still have an option because I don't think he wants to piss the non-crypto people off. Yeah, that's all.
Okay. I think he believes that everyone's going to be happy and delighted once he brings them into the land of Bitcoin.
It's just like the Christian thing that you will every Christian want you to be a Christian, right?
Tyler, do you know what's really
interesting?
Just
preaching.
Tyler, you know what's really interesting that I don't know if anyone's put the dots together. Remember what we were talking about in terms of the OnlyFans. And remember what you said about the fact that, I don't know who said it, but someone said that there's also a lot of porn on Twitter as well. It's just not as obvious.
Yes. So
just make the connection. If people are using Twitter already, I mean, strategically, you could really make a play for those people. Those people may also move over to the super followers if super followers gets it first, because then they end up getting decentralized, and then they'll say fuck all to OnlyFans because then they could just do it through Twitter.
Yeah. By the way,
He can
somebody.
strategically do it different ways. He's got a different possibility and different angles how he could leverage that. He doesn't have just one way he could skin a cat. I think he's got several.
So I want to see what Aaron thinks on this, because this kind of his cup of tea as well. But by the way, I saw a tweet that I need to find again, but since we met last time, precisely about now some anti-porn initiative is now focused on Twitter. Can somebody find that headline somewhere and DM it to me? But Aaron, did you have a thought on super follow the tipping on Twitter through Bitcoin, and now that they've enabled super followers, how long before they enable that through Bitcoin as well? Because this all goes back to what I asked Twitter CFO Ned in Twitter Spaces, in one of the very first Twitter Space rooms I or anyone ever created, where I said, hey, Ned, is it possible that in the future you're going to have use Twitter and every Twitter user will have I
pinged it to you, Tyler.
A Cash App account which accepts Bitcoin, and having a Cash App wallet with Bitcoin, and people in Twitter will become a very Bitcoinized place. And it seems like Jack does have that all in mind. It's going to become Bitcoin land over there.
It's in your message. It's in your email 2 weeks ago on Vice.
Tyler, for me,
Tyler?
I think one thing that I've seen a success on is if we take a step back and look at MasterCard and Visa as a payment rail of fiat currency, the one thing that they did successfully was they built the infrastructure and they built the rails, decades ago, 50 years ago. And the best thing that they ever did was make payments disappear, make them invisible. And I think what you're seeing the likes of the next generation rails, whether they be, blockchain, Ethereum, Solana, whatever rail it needs to be. It's a decentralized payment network. And I think you're seeing the likes of Jack Dorsey, you're seeing the likes of people investing in that decentralized finance. And yes, we're starting with Bitcoin. Yes, we're starting with that as the cryptocurrency. But if Bitcoin is a stored value, and it's something that can be added as like a digital gold, and we're at the early stage of exchanging digital gold. Going forward, there are hundreds and hundreds, and it's not just about altcoins. There are hundreds and hundreds of protocols in decentralized finance. There are hundreds and hundreds of ways of expressing currencies across these networks that I think with Jack behind creator economy, with him, purchasing everything to support that creator economy in a open, transparent way, I think this is a toe dipping in the water of what that might look like. And in 10 years' time, tipping of all forms of currency, of all forms of tokens will be possible.
But now this adds a whole other reason for why he wants Twitter itself to become decentralized. Because if Twitter's using Bitcoin as the official, at the top level, as Amy said, from the high level, he has stated very transparently, he believes Bitcoin will be the currency of the planet. That's just how he thinks about it. And if he believes that, the way he says it, if he walks the walk or walks the talk, that Twitter will be, he's going to leverage all of his biggest asset, which is Twitter, to help enable that vision. Because, he's got a whole lot of people all over the world using Twitter. Okay. And now he's about to add a whole lot of products and services into Twitter. And the tip jar is the first little easy peasy piece. And then so is super followers. And so are NFTs. And so are all of just like all the other apps are becoming e-commercified. And there are multiple different ticketed Twitter Spaces rooms and all kinds of little ways that people will need to pay for products and services on Twitter. So why wouldn't he then, of course, use Bitcoin for that? And he's doing not only a decentralized exchange, but a decentralized Twitter. Because if he builds a decentralized exchange to power the Bitcoin transactions on Twitter, the government could still come to him and say, we don't like what you're doing with Bitcoin through these decentralized exchanges and Twitter. We must regulate that exchange. And he's going to say, fuck no, you're not. And so now we know, that maybe this is why he feels the need he has to decentralize Twitter as well, so that he can say, you all can try and do whatever the fuck you think you need to try and do. Good luck shutting it all down. It's all operating fully decentralized, non-custodial, as he's saying he's doing. So that Twitter, now we thought Twitter would need to be decentralized to stop governments who forcing them to, wanting, the whole headache of constant emails from government saying, take this down, take that down, take this, remove this content, moderate this content. But it might also be to protect it from the wolves who want to stop the Bitcoinization of Twitter.
Hey, Tyler, I don't see what would stop the government, decentralized or not, for saying that if we don't have control or we can't follow this stuff, that he's helping, violate anti-money laundering laws, and they'll indict him for that.
Let me add to that, because I think where we're going with this, is I actually don't think Jack's going to fight regulation. I really don't. I don't think he's doing decentralization to fight regulation. In fact, I think it'll be supportive of regulation. Like the fact when you leverage something on a blockchain, the transparency and the immutability supports that. It actually supports better regulation. And so I think we're going to see KYC, know your customer, and anti-money laundering schemes be supportive of blockchain decentralized infrastructures. What you're going to see is the transparency of it will hopefully remove the issues that are happening with fraud and fraudulent accounts and disinformation, and will give them more control. And I think what you'll see from Jack is he's actually thinking infrastructurally. He's thinking from the infrastructure perspective, building this decentralized format is better for everybody. And he just wants to be in the middle of it.
Tyler, what would that mean for, let's say, Indian user data? Would it be decentralized over all the nodes across globes? Because government wouldn't allow any of these data to be, if there is any hint of the Indian citizens' data going or getting stored or distributed across any nodes outside India, they would just ban it. So that decentralization, how would that happen? And what would be the consensus?
Nobody outside of his little team knows at this point.
Yeah, it would the decentralization, the gentleman that's speaking, that's obviously a question that comes up, but when something gets decentralized, that is it. This is also why India is already banning it in certain places as well. I think that's why a lot of governments are challenged by it, because when one doesn't understand it, the first thing that they want to do is block it, because they're not clear to the understanding. This is why Nicholas is so well spoken on the context about protecting identity, right? Tyler, this is why he talks about that, because we're still so in the early infancy stages of setting up this framework and infrastructure. So it does mean that, of course, you could have decentralization, but you do want to protect the data of the identity of a person, and just for the person, like Nicholas talks about very, very well. And that's a component of it, but I think the two should not get mixed up, because it's decentralization of the network and of a currency, but the person's personal data is not there attached to the Bitcoin address. Do you see what I'm saying? It's not attached to the Bitcoin address. If he makes it decentralized, only the address will be what people see in the context of Blue Sky or Twitter. They'll only see the Bitcoin address and the Lightning Network address. Unless someone goes a deep dive into it, they won't be able to find out the identity of that person without them having the tools, the legal tools, to be able to do that. And that's why when we work with Chainalyst, that's what Chainalyst consultants do. They work with the FBI, they work with authorities to find that information, because you cannot find that information and connect the dots legally without the support of services like that. So the person's identity will remain their own identity unless someone, like Ken has said, if they do nefarious stuff and we start seeing transactions of large sums splitting into 10 wallets, that could also raise a flag. Who the hell is dividing this Bitcoin up across 10 wallets? Why is it going to this wallet over here? And you follow the patterns that look odd. And that's what FBI does. That's what any detective does. They follow patterns that are common patterns that they see when money laundering happens. And when money laundering happens, they're usually looking at the larger amounts. Anyone wants to learn a little bit about that industry, go look at Ozark on Netflix, because those Netflix shows are getting really, really good at teaching a lot of people a lot of things. And trust me, if you watch Ozark, maybe the first and second season, you'll get to understand how money laundering happens with cash. And it still happens. So when you look at Satoshis, I don't think people are money laundering with Satoshis. Maybe with the bigger construct of Bitcoin, because it's the whole caboodle. But I wouldn't say down to the Sats level. Those are just your porn only fans that want to just make a couple of bucks. I don't think it's so dramatic, but we're really kind of going out there like to be on the drama side. So I just think what Jack's doing right now, he talked about at the Bitcoin conference, he was really strategic and very helicopter view. He took it down to the minutia to leave a teaser with us about Blue Sky, and now you're seeing it all come together within 3 months. You're seeing all of this come together. And as Aaron stated, it's very strategic for him. I think it's very strategic because at the end of the day, if he clears everything to be decentralized, then to Tyler, your point's actually right there. How can, if something's decentralized, how can they trace it back and put it on him? Because it's decentralized.
So, Aaron, what do you see currently that makes you think that he will do it in a compliant way? And I guess somebody could ask me the same. What do I see that makes me think that he'll do it in a true, quote unquote, truly decentralized way?
Because of the fact that this is around payments, and no matter what, the way that payments work are through trust. Okay, and from a trust perspective, both ends of the transaction have to be trusted. And what we've seen in a form of trust is we see that consumers trust regulation. They may not know banks today like banks existed 50 years ago, and the banks that are in 50 years' time will not be the banks of today. But when it comes to making a payment, trust is where it's supported. And from that perspective, the rails that make those transactions happen, MasterCard and Visa have successfully done it for 50 years. Just look at their share price over 50 years. It has never gone down over time in those 50 years. And the same we're seeing with embedded finance, with Stripe, and they're all in the fiat world. For me, Jack is just seeing what's happened in the past, and he's looking at it going forward, going, I want to create the infrastructure going forward. I know there will be at one point, I will need to support regulation, and the regulation will vary outside of the US, it'll vary inside of the US. And I think he'll basically say, where I can educate these regulatory departments on what is required, if I can show them transparency, if I can show them immutability, and if I can be the right guy supporting that for the creator economy, it's a win-win for both ends of the transaction.
Okay. So the next one is Apple says that Arizona and Georgia will be the first American states supporting their new ID inside of the iOS 15, which we will all be downloading any day now, with 6 more states, including Utah, Maryland, Iowa, expected to follow soon. And they want to digitize your identity into the operating system. And you will no longer, it actually is your actual ID. You can actually take the plastic card and throw it away if you want. That's when you read the fine print on this, that this will actually replace your ID. And then, of course, that ID, Apple also says they will do a face scan of you and merge the two as part of your digital identity within the app, so that you could then authenticate yourself with your face, which nobody else has brought this up yet. So you could start seeing face scan authenticators in some.
This is gonna be interesting because, when you get pulled over, you're suddenly producing your handset that typically you're gonna try to protect with your life from getting the cops into it. So there must be a layer where it will only reveal the ID and that's it.
And well, now, and there's plenty of YouTube videos of people playing cat and mouse games with police officers where they ask for their ID, and especially in America, you'll see a lot of these videos for some reason you see more of them on Facebook than anywhere, where it's, a police officer saying, do you have your ID? And the person says, no, I don't. And there's no law saying that you have to show your ID. So people say, no, I don't have it. The dog ate it. And now the game is going to be evolved to be like, do you have your smartphone to show your ID? No, I don't have a smartphone. I don't have an iPhone. So it's going to be a fun extra level of cat and mouse. Oh, really? Because it used to be like, I left my ID at home. But now to say I left my smartphone at home, I don't really believe that you left your smartphone at home. Let me go get my smartphone scanner to see if there's a smartphone in your car somewhere.
But so here's the thing: back when Touch ID first came out, there was maybe the laws changed, but biometrically, they can't compel you to give up a fingerprint, but they can use your face to unlock a phone.
Correct.
And so now you have verified ID that already knows your facial geometry, right? And then you're gonna have to unlock your phone to show them that you're who you are. Well, guess what? After you've done that, your phone's now open for law enforcement to potentially get into it and discover more evidence. So I think this is going to raise some major civil rights type issues, but hopefully Apple's thought it out.
Tyler?
Yes, Aaron.
Yeah, just wondering, like, I'm just thinking, so I've got no facts on this, right? So I spoke to Apple 2015 about digitizing identity, and this goes down to near field comms. So like you tap your phone for Apple Pay, we were looking at it from a digitizing your driving license and then tapping your phone against another, passport terminal or whatever,
right,
to show yourself. So this is at the device level, but just to think about you and I, and we've spoken openly in this in TNATW about Apple ID and identity being so important. I wonder if Apple are also playing the long game of connecting this into the iCloud, where it's not just about storing your digitized driving license or passport on the device, which is very secure. It's a very secure hardware device. I wonder, will they connect it to your iCloud account? And therefore, Chris saying about getting a facial, I wonder if the police officers can use facial recognition to verify you are who you are and your driving license is who it is in the cloud whilst you're sitting in the car. I wonder, will it get to that point that actually be cloud secure, not just device secure?
Well, no doubt they're going to have what is Charles's company called, the Clearview AI app on their phone, and the police officer will just walk up with their phone and scan your face and be like, "Oh, hello, Mr. Crowley, how are you today?"
Right, exactly.
And the phone could potentially broadcast it electronically too. The MAC address and stuff like that. Believe it or not, is always available. So I'm sure there would be ways that really quickly they could just pass that info to whoever needs it.
And by
the
way,
they could, but there's something like the one thing that when we kept on getting so I spoke to Apple for 6 years about NFC between 2009 and 2015 for 6 years. And 2007 to 2013, 6 years. And they said no to putting NFC, near field comms, in it. And they took a long, long time because they are so security conscious about their walled environment. I don't see them broadcasting, even if it's just a MAC address. I don't see them broadcasting. What I do see them giving is the user the opportunity to authenticate themselves to their device, and then allowing that device to transmit in a near field comms way. So it's 4 inches in a near field comms way that you can pass your driving license over to a trusted source. I think the broadcasting piece is probably where Apple will stop. Now, that's not to say they won't work with local government departments to put it into the cloud and have a secure walled environment in the cloud. It'll be interesting to see.
So Australia yesterday just passed a new regulation that gives police officers without search warrants full access to all of your social media accounts, and they can even change your password, delete content on your devices and your cloud accounts of any apps, and there's incredible fines for any company that doesn't comply with those demands.
I'm wondering how they are getting around privacy laws for these kind of things. I mean, this is a huge issue. If you watch any of the Snowden videos at all, you will know that this is a huge issue pretty much everywhere. And I remember yesterday, everybody was talking about like when you travel, for example, if you if you go into another country and like we were talking about China and how they can use the security law to see if you're an anti-Chinese person, and it's probably going to behoove people a lot to have a burner phone when they travel and things like this. So nowadays, maybe people will carry two phones with them, one for the police and one for themselves.
Yeah, I remember when Chris was actually speaking about that, just having a separate phone for the Clubhouse socials and all of these things and people cracking down on them. But I was listening to the last story, I'm thinking, considering you can tell whether someone has COVID or something. I remember a story last time on Tech News Around the World, and maybe your phone would be able to tell if you're distressed, so it won't unlock, or it will actually keep all your data private. Like maybe, I don't know.
So it says, with Labour support, an Australian government law giving police unprecedented powers to spy on criminal suspects online, interrupt their data, and take over their accounts was passed. Despite worries about the low bar for who can issue a warrant and the government failure to adopt all of the protections proposed by the Bipartisan Joint Committee on the Intelligence and Security, the Senate passed the Identify and Disrupt Bill on Wednesday. The surveillance legislation amendment, called Identify and Disrupt, Bill 220, Identify and Disrupt Bill, provides 3 new types of warrants that allow the Australian Federal Police and Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission to edit and erase, take over accounts, and spy on Australians who are subjected or who are suspected of being involved in criminal networks. These 3 additional authorities to combat online crime, the ability to disrupt data by modifying, copying, editing, or removing, is granted by a data disruption warrant. A network activity warrant permits the authorities to gather information from devices or networks used or anticipated to be used by those who are subject of the order, and account takeovers permits the police to seize control of an internet account, such as a social media account, in order to obtain information for an investigation. Okay, so the next headline is from Reuters, that according to a filing, the SEC sues Satish Kumbani, the founder of now defunct BitConnect and promoter of over a $2 billion crypto fraud scheme, and Kumbani's location is unknown currently. So the hunt is on. What is the reward, and can we turn that into a social media game of its own? Help us find Satish Kumbani. And yeah, I remind nobody knows this, but how old was I? Right when I was finishing college, I created a website called The Big Chase, and I had a $10,000 reward if you could find me, because I had the first digital camera ever released on the market, and I was taking photos and publishing them to my website every 5 minutes, and I got a bunch of tech journalists to cover that story, but nobody ever found me. So
is there a reward for this guy, Tyler?
Yeah, it doesn't say if there's a reward, but I often think about doing that project again now in the age of, cameras that you could wear, on glasses and walk around, and a live stream, and it would be a version of Tag, or, Where's Waldo on a global scale using social media, Instagram or whatnot. So,
well, I'll keep an eye out for Satish in Moldova.
Okay, so he might be in Moldova, hanging out.
I'm not giving up on Moldova yet, Vinay.
The next one says Microsoft announces an online-only Surface hardware event for September 22nd. Facebook says it helped airlift 175 Afghan citizens out of Afghanistan to Mexico, including journalists and some of its own employees. Probably in the reverse order. Probably they were actually there to help their own employees get out of Afghanistan. That's just a safe hunch. Just call that a hunch. That was their main priority. Maybe kind of reverse the order on those. Facebook was helping its own employees get out of Afghanistan, and they realized they had a few extra seats on the plane. So, hey, journalists, we don't hate you. We're not trying to kill your business. I understand that everyone's sharing your links on our platform, and you're not getting paid for all of that sharing of your content, but we don't hate you. We're not trying to kill you. Why don't you go ahead and hop on our plane? Oh, your publication doesn't have a plane to get you out of here? Hey, come on the Facebook plane. We've got a couple extra seats over here. So maybe you can stop writing articles about how we're evil monsters. Just hop on the plane here. And by the way, we're going to let some other journalists know that we're saving your dumbasses. So, hey, Facebook actually contacted the BBC to let the BBC know that they've helped journalists escape Afghanistan. How's that? How's that for a headline? Yeah.
Did Facebook charge them $6,500 per seat?
So, but Facebook on Wednesday confirmed that it was part of an effort. No, they didn't need to confirm. They contacted you to tell you, you dumbass. They're not confirm. What do you mean they confirmed? That sounds like you asked them. You didn't ask them. They called you on the phone and said, "Hey, you know what? You know what we did? Guess what we did?" That's not confirming. That's just calling you to let you know something you didn't already know. So Facebook contacted the BBC to tell the BBC, guess what we did? We did something good. Could you please write about it? Because we need a lot of good press right now, because there's a whole lot of negative press right now, because somebody's a Politico, Mark Scott at Politico, is about to figure out that we actually stopped that NYU PhD research project. The reason we really shut that thing down was because that lady found out that we had removed thousands of Facebook posts by the January 6th Capitol rioters. And Mark Scott at Politico is about to figure out that the real reason we shut her down was because she had just found that out. And so maybe we can make a smokescreen or something and tell everyone we saved a whole bunch of Afghani citizens or something, you know? So how's that sound, BBC? Could you run that article, please? And they did. And the BBC headline says, Facebook contacts us and tells us they just saved a bunch of people from Afghanistan. So that's the headline. Facebook says it helped airlift 175 Afghan citizens out of Afghanistan to Mexico, including journalists and some of its own employees. The next one is from Bloomberg. They say they have sources that the Department of Justice is preparing to file a second antitrust lawsuit against Google by the end of this year, targeting Google's digital ad business. U.S. antitrust officials are preparing a second monopoly lawsuit against Alphabet's Google over the company's digital ad business. Okay, good luck with that. The next one is from The Information, which says Binance's CEO, which we call CZ, and CZ says that Binance US is set to close a large private fundraising round. By the way, that's not how it works. If you're raising a large private fundraising round for a tech company, you've probably noticed, if you've been with us for even more than one day, we often read headlines, which I'm going to read later down the stack here, like article number 40 is undoubtedly going to be something like, here, let me just find one. Oh, here's one. No, that's a quarter earnings report. Some such and such startup raises 200 million or 5 million or 20 million. We read these all the time. Startup raises X million, right? You've heard me read that article 1,000 times. Startup A raises 20 million. Here's one. Joy, an all-in-one wedding planning service, raises 20 million, Series A, led by whoever. All day long. We read those headlines all day long. This startup raised 20 million. This startup raised 5 million. This startup raised 50 million, usually by Tiger Global. I mean, that's how often we read them, that you usually know who funded them. Now, notice, this is quite different. This is very different. This is not Binance just raised a whole bunch of money. This is something you don't really ever hear. Binance says it's going to raise a whole bunch of money. How many times have you heard me say that? Fucking zero. Because that's not how it works. That's not how the startup game works. That's not how VC works. Startups don't go around saying, we're going to go raise a bunch of money soon. You don't do that. That is unkosher. That is not halal. That is the opposite of how it works in Silicon Valley. Startups don't go around saying, you know what, in the 2 months, we're going to announce a big fundraising. You could say that to your friend at dinner. You can say
that's a public solicitation, isn't it? I mean, that's
precisely right. There's a very important reason you never hear startups saying this in headlines, because that, first of all, that's not news that a startup's raising money, but more importantly, there's basically a law that says you're not allowed to publicly announce that you're fundraising. You're soliciting your fundraising round. You're not allowed to do that. So, CZ, I'm calling bullshit on you, buddy. I don't think you are about to close a large private fundraising round, because you wouldn't tell us if that was true. If that was the case, you would intentionally keep your mouth shut about that.
Or Tyler, if you are, This is your way of PRing it to get people to come and actually bloody do it with you.
That's why it's against the law to do that. That's solicitation.
And it puts you at a negotiation disadvantage because if the investors know you,
Vinay, we can't hear you.
I think it puts you at a
We can't hear you, Vinay.
disadvantage.
You sound like you're
Your
a mile
audio
away.
quality. Yeah, your audio quality is not good, Vinay.
Yeah. Okay.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect.
I said it puts them also at a disadvantage because if you're going to go and say you're going to raise money, investors are going to screw you because they're going to get better terms.
Right. Because you just announced that you've already got it wrapped up. It's already a done deal, and it's not. And so guess what? We want even better terms because you're desperate to make good on the promise that this is a done deal when it's not. That's why startups never do this. There's a lot of reasons startups never do this, but this is totally in character with batshit crazy Binance. This dude is crazy as a fucking loon. He goes around saying, I want to be the most regulation-friendly startup, when in fact it's the most unfriendly regulatory startup in the history of startups. There was, in the past 3 months, every week, a new country was coming out and saying, this company is fucking nuts. They're operating illegally without a license. Every week, a new country. There was about 20 countries. I cannot think of another startup in the history of startups that had anything similar to that. That is wild, unregulated, batshit crazy operations. Very unprofessional, ridiculous, absurd. You're embarrassing yourself and you're making startups look bad globally by doing this.
Literally no shame. That's
shameless, utterly bizarre, berserk behavior without an office anywhere, without any real structure to the company. You know, this is just some wacky project you've got going on, and the countries are calling you out. And then you have the gall to say, we want to be the most regulatory friendly, startup. What? You're trying to run this company from a fucking boat in the middle of the ocean. What are you?
And the latest country was Singapore today. Singapore.
Oh, there's a new one every week. So this dude has a rich history of just talking out of his ass. So when he says that they're set to close a large private fundraising round, forgive me, I call me skeptical, CZ, because the history of your headlines would lead anybody to think that nothing you say can be taken seriously. So, and of course he's doubling down and saying they could go public in the next 3 years. Say what? Okay. Do you realize how much regulation and scrutiny you must conform to go public in America? What country are you talking about that you would go public?
It's like, did you not hear Danish say that even raising his seed round was like getting a colonoscopy?
Do you know how much regulation scrutiny you're going to have to go through to go public? And everything you've done to this date is the opposite of complying with regulation scrutiny. This dude's a real special cookie.
Well, their target is like IPO in US in 3 years. That's their target.
I know what he says his target is, but what he's doing and what he's saying are two completely opposite things. You can't be more diametrically opposed. What he's saying and what he's doing. His US CEO just resigned because he's so fucking crazy.
Okay, here's the news.
So my US CEO just resigned, but we're just about to close a large private fundraising round. Oh, really? Show me an investor who's going to give you a whole shit ton of money 3 weeks after your US CEO just resigned.
I'm struggling for the name of that Swiss citizen China had, because I'm sure it's the same person.
So, call me skeptical, CZ.
Binance news from Singapore.
Okay.
The Monetary Authority of Singapore, MAS, has ordered Binance to stop providing payment services in Singapore immediately and cease soliciting business from Singapore residents. So
try it again slower.
The Monetary Authority of Singapore, MAS, has ordered Binance to stop providing payment services in Singapore and to cease soliciting business from Singapore residents. So the regulator has reviewed Binance.com's operation and is of the view that the website's operator, Binance, may be in breach of the Payment Service Act for carrying on business of providing payment services to and soliciting such business from Singapore residents without an appropriate license. So they don't have a license in Singapore too.
So they just got kicked out of Singapore.
Yep, ordered to stop.
But guess what? He's not going to stop in Singapore. And this is my point. He gets one of these every week from a different country, and he doesn't comply with their demand to stop doing business there. He's not, first of all, he's not operating in the normal process of things. If you get the correct, if you want to do finance services in a country, you have to first say, hey, I would like to do finance services in your country. What are the rules and regulations? I must, here's the forms, here's the paperwork. You got to do this. I'll jump through the correct hoops. There's a lot of hoops. He's not even bothering with the hoops. He's just operating. And then they say, hey, you're not operating. And you're clearly not showing any interest in wanting to jump through our hoops. Hence, Singapore correctly says, get the fuck out of here. You can't operate here anymore. And then he says, nah, fuck you. I'm going to keep operating.
Okay, there's further news. So MAS also placed, besides Binance.com, into this investor alert list on Thursday to warn consumers in Singapore and Binance is not regulated or licensed. And on top of this, the list flags companies that are not licensed by the MAS but may have given investors the impression that they are sanctioned by the Singapore regulator. So as of today, the MAS website listed 699 companies, including those registered overseas, which may have been wrongly perceived to be regulated by the MAS. So, meaning to say that there are many, many such crypto projects in Singapore that may seem to be licensed, but they are not. So please be aware, investors. Thank you.
Right.
699 such companies, they're all blacklisted now.
Okay. So, which means there's a lot of loopholes you got to jump through. And that's why they don't want to do it. And that's why he's not doing it either. And he's not really doing it anywhere. So to give the impression, we're good actors. We got a bunch of great investors going to give us a whole bunch of money. We're going to IPO. Sure you are, CZ. Sure you are. How about you haven't even announced your, do they have a new CEO for Binance US? Anyway, weird. Really, really weird. So the next one is from...
Hey, really, Tyler, really quick. We got Charles down there. I know you were looking for him.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next one is...
By the way, I really enjoyed that rant, Tyler. That was awesome. I just want to be firmly in favor of that.
All right. So the next one is from Sifted. Sifted is a newer publication, which is a sister publication of Financial Times out of the EU. And I see Belinda has her hand up, so I'm trying to bring Belinda up. So Sifted is the source of this next one. It says French grocery delivery startup called Cajoo raises 40 million Series A from Carrefour. Remember, I was just saying, the traditional way that startups announce that they've gotten fundraising is they actually finish the fucking fundraising and then they announce the headline like I just read. French grocery deliveries Cajoo raises 40 million from Carrefour, right? I read these every day, all day, usually 3, 4, 5, 6 every fucking day. How many times have you heard me read some startups claiming they're about to finish a fundraising? Can you name another startup that we've read that headline about other than Binance today? No, startups don't do that. Startups don't go around saying we're about to close a big round. No, you don't do that. That's really shady behavior. That you're signaling that you're a shady fucker when you do that. We don't believe you when you do that. Only shady people do that, CZ. So, anyway, this French grocery delivery startup Cajoo that just raised 40 million. And by the way, when you do make a fundraising announcement, the deal's usually been closed by a month or 2 or 3. They actually usually wait for an opportunistic moment to reveal it. They don't usually announce it immediately after it's done. They usually finish it and then they think and think, we've got this headline that we know we can release, that we know the tech press will write. Maybe we should wait for an ideal moment. You don't have to just toss that, out right away. You can marinate it for a little bit, think about it, maybe time it with some other thing, That's how the really smart ones do. So anyway, the funny part about this headline from Kaju raising 40 million is the people who they raised it from, which is Carrefour, which is one of the world's biggest food supermarket conglomerates. There's like Tesco in the UK, Carrefour in France might be the biggest in the world, honestly. And they're tremendously huge. And I love there's the one main quote in this article is from one of the founders of the startup, Kaju, says, some competitors of ours have much more money than us, but we have an advantage in Carrefour. He's just flexing that, he's got one of the big, grocery company is invested in them and they've got a lot of muscle and, political muscle and whatnot. So the next one's from AP, Associated Press, that the NHTSA sends Tesla a letter asking for detailed information on how autopilot detects and responds to parked emergency vehicles as part of a wider investigation as to why these Tesla cars using autopilot keep crashing into safety vehicles with their sirens and lights flashing. What the fuck is going on, Tesla?
They're just anti-police, Tyler. That's what's up.
The U.S. government's Highway Safety Agency wants detailed information on why the fuck are you crashing into our ambulances and fire trucks and police vehicles with the sirens on?
It's called NHTSA, by the way. NH. That's how they call it.
Yeah, NHTSA. Yeah, NHTSA. So, they very much do want to know because it's really fucking weird. And apparently the sirens really freak out the camera system in the Teslas. Tesla is ordered to turn over autopilot data to Federal Safety Agency. Tesla must tell NHTSA how autopilot sees emergency vehicles. NHTSA records autopilot crash in State Trooper as 12th for Tesla. It's just they're wildly disproportionately crashing into these emergency vehicles. So
now let's note we have the NHTSA investigation, we have the SEC investigation into Musk, we have the dispute between SpaceX and Blue Origin, where Bezos is offering a free moon mission.
Okay, so hang on, hold on, Charles.
Very interesting stuff going on here.
Hold on, Charles. Are you implying that Bezos might be behind all of these?
I'm saying the U.S. deep state is coming for Elon Musk. That's why he wasn't invited to that meeting of electric car manufacturers. I think the evidence sort of lines up in that direction.
Yeah, but Charles, the SEC never says anything to him, regardless, man. You rightly
well, they
pointed
didn't
out.
under Trump. They certainly didn't under Trump. But we'll see what
Valid
happens
point.
under.
Very valid.
We'll see what happens under the new regime.
Okay.
Very valid point.
So Twitter introduces safety mode. Because you want to feel safer on Twitter. Because, you get offended by everything and you get outraged. Somebody, heaven forbid, tweeted something that offends you. So now they've introduced safety mode, so you can feel safe on the interweb, on the internet. Because, you expect to never be offended by anything anybody says on the fucking internet. So they introduced safety mode. It's kind of like the little wheels on the tricycle. So, you don't fall down and hurt a boo-boo on your knee, because, oh my God, somebody said something on the fucking internet that offends me. So they launched safety mode. Feeling safe on Twitter looks different for everybody, Twitter says. We've rolled out features and settings that may help you feel more comfortable and in control of your experience. And we want to do more to reduce the burden on people dealing with unwelcome interactions. Dear God. Unwelcome tweets and noise.
Well, I would add.
Yes.
For that article, more so for the young people that suffer from maybe bulimia or just weight issues and stuff like that they actually do to corner themselves off into their little communities, if you know what I mean. So I hear a lot of that, especially in the fashion industry as well. So these girls like really have a hard time and all of these things. So that may be more suited towards them and like their community as well.
So the Twitter's announcements of safety mode continues. Unwelcome tweets and noise can get in the way of conversations on Twitter, so we're introducing safety mode, a new feature that aims to reduce disruptive interactions. Starting today, we're rolling out this safety feature to a small group on iOS and Android, beginning with accounts that have English language settings. Well, that's a privilege, isn't it? So here's how it works. Safety mode is a feature that temporarily blocks accounts for 7 days for using potentially harmful language, such as insults or hateful remarks, or sending repetitive and uninvited replies or mentions. When the feature is turned on in your settings, our system will assess the likelihood of a negative engagement, and considering both of the tweet's content and relationship between the tweet author and the replier, our technology takes existing relationships into account, so accounts you follow or frequently interact with may not be auto-blocked. Authors of tweets found by our technology to be harmful or uninvited will be auto-blocked, meaning they'll temporarily be unable to follow your account, see your tweets, or send you direct messages. You can find information about the tweets flagged from safety mode and view the details of temporarily blocked accounts at any time. Before each safety mode period ends, you'll receive a notification recapping this information. We won't always get this right, and we may make mistakes. So safety mode auto blocks can be seen and undone at any time in your settings. We'll also regularly monitor the accuracy of our safety mode systems to make improvements to our detection capabilities. We want you to enjoy healthy conversations, so this test is one way we're limiting overwhelming and unwelcome interactions that can interrupt those conversations. Our goal is to better protect the individual on the receiving end of tweets by reducing the prevalence and visibility of harmful remarks. Throughout the product development process, we conducted several listening and feedback sessions for trusted partners with experience in online safety, mental health, and human rights, including members of the Trust and Safety Council. Their feedback influenced adjustments to make safety mode easier to use and helped us to think through ways to address the potential manipulation of our technology. These trusted partners also played an important role in nominating Twitter account owners to join the feedback group, prioritizing people from marginalized communities and female journalists. So now we're making it a safe space for everybody. And you can, there is a word feature where you can ban any word that you don't ever want to see in Twitter. And if anyone tries to message you with that word, you won't see it either. You can make words that offend you disappear forever from the platform. So I
feel like I saw a Black Mirror about this, where a mother installed some sort of vision system into her daughter's eyes so that her daughter couldn't see anything harmful. I just thought that was kind of interesting.
Well, that goes back to the origins of Buddha, actually. Gautama Siddhartha. He was raised as a prince and was never able to see anything negative or anything unbeautiful or anything poor. And then one day he saw a beggar and he realized, shit, I was lied to. And then he went out and did the opposite, went to the other extreme and wanted to surround himself, never eat and, and then he realized there's the middle way. And that was that he was sitting under the tree and realized, it's not the extreme of sheltering myself from the world, and it's not the extreme of, hanging out with the beggars and not eating. It's actually the middle. It's, called being a normal person. That was his big epiphany. So, that's why Buddhism is not extreme. It's intentionally by design, not extreme. And that's why you don't have a whole lot of Buddhist extremists. So the next one is a Swedish startup called Stravito, which offers cloud-based market research tools, raises 12.4 million euros. Series A. Again, yet another startup raising money and then announcing it. You see the pattern here? Are you noticing a pattern? That CZ from Binance exclusively is not following. You see, following Tencent, Alibaba pledges $15.5 billion, beating $15.5 billion over 5 years towards China's Common Prosperity Vision, spreading the money across 10 initiatives. E-commerce giant to devote 100 billion yuan, about $15.5 billion, over 5 years to societal good.
Philanthropy at gunpoint. You want to be a good citizen.
I love
good
the way
corporate citizenship.
I love the way China works. The government
that would never happen. That would never happen in the United States
or Europe.
No one would ever pressure an American billionaire to donate money to a charitable cause. And if you think that they would, well, that's just a very mean thought.
I think
we'll guilt them with essentially form letters and donor lists and very fancy dinners. You'll have all the fancy dinners until you basically comply.
What I love is that first, it's just for those who don't know, here's what happened. As crazy as this might sound, Xi Jinping made an announcement that China that the billionaires need to start paying to the common prosperity of China. They need to start contributing to the common prosperity, meaning wealth redistribution. In English, in American English, we call that wealth redistribution. So, Tencent, which is the owner, the biggest tech company in China, they have WeChat, which is the most powerful app in all of China. It's the super app that allows you to do hundreds of different functions and features and services and whatnot simultaneously.
You don't exist as a citizen if you don't run it. You can't eat food at the restaurants. You can't basically go in front of the subway stuff. I mean, it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, WeChat's huge. Tencent is the company. Tencent, as soon as Uncle Xi announced, the wealth redistribution plan, just hinted that the big power and powerful need to contribute to the common, quote unquote, common prosperity of the Chinese people. Tencent said, you know what? We hear you, Uncle Xi. How's 7.5 million sound? $1 billion. $7.5 billion sound. Sound good? Thought you'd like that. Keep the tip. And then 24 hours later said, you know what? We reconsidered. How's $15 billion sound? Uncle Xi.
I would have been into anything for the phone call that they're on, right? Of like, yeah. What causes them to basically double that overnight? That'd be one hell of a phone call, right?
This is what happened.
Right. When America's richest man, or actually the world's richest man, Jeff Bezos' ex-wife, donates billions of dollars to all these, progressive causes, that has nothing to do with wealth redistribution whatsoever, of course.
So, but not to be outdone, that was a week ago, and then today, Alibaba, arguably the second biggest Chinese tech company, pledges $15.5 billion to be just one step above Tencent's $15 billion. So Alibaba does $15.5 billion, and the reason that's a weird number is because in Chinese currency, yuan, it turns out to 100 billion yuan. So it's a nice round number in Chinese, which just happens to be just a bit over what Tencent was doing. So
they don't want to be sent to finger painting school.
Well, he's already there. Jack Ma's already got.
Well, Jack's there, but he still has executives in the rest of the company that could afford to take vacations, right?
Common prosperity.
Jack came back for a little bit. He's back, but he's just quiet.
Yeah, he was seen playing golf. But by the way, this is probably the most successful fundraising telethon ever done.
Well, Uncle Xi knows how to raise money. $30 billion.
You don't even need to have they're having their big that was a big deal of having the e-commerce day or whatever they have not Singles Day but it's the big the shopping holiday they have, right? And it's it's almost like their version of
Singles Day.
It is a Singles Day.
Yeah, Singles Day. It was a really big deal, and everyone has their thing. It's almost like
Pinduoduo gave to the farmers as well, Chris. Don't forget that Pinduoduo gave to the farmers too. So that's the third one.
Yeah.
Just wait until President Biden does this in spring 2022 as his re-elect drive. Just wait.
It's gonna be like, here, give all your Bitcoin with stuff because we found out that's a thing.
Charles, I think you're bang on. How much of that money is going to go for public good and how much it's going to go to bribe the Communist Party members to keep Xi's posture in shape is yet to be seen.
Right, because the money that's spent by Jeff Bezos in the U.S. to go to all these charitable causes, of course, as we know, only goes to charitable causes. And the nonprofit work in the United States is not one of the most profitable industries in the U.S. Of course.
It's strategically a charitable, which is a very different kind of way. It's basically making sure you get max amount of karma without having to basically change anything and can keep the current system in place.
So the next headline here is that the Texas Senate passes bill banning social media companies with 50 million or more users, so that's every social media company, from censoring users' political views, and Governor Abbott is expected to sign it into law. And it also, not only will social media platforms and apps not be able to censor any political comments of any kind, but they will also not be able to deplatform or demonetize. And that demonetize one is particularly interesting because YouTube is a platform, and YouTube has a whole lot of people who post a lot of videos who very often get demonetized. Their video is not able to be monetized because it has a political view that is not, fitting with YouTube's censors policies. So in Texas is saying, you can't do this. Now, Texas is the second state to push through a bill aimed at combating the alleged censorship of conservatives online. In May, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a similar measure that would fine platforms for banning political candidates, like President Trump, who was banned, and now that would be illegal. This would make it illegal in Florida and now in Texas for deplatforming or removing or banning or even taking down content from President Trump. The law was blocked by a Florida U.S. District Court in June.
Solution: Texas Internet.
The judge wrote that much of the bill's text was wholly at odds with accepted constitutional principles. The Texas bill could face a similar fate, according to experts. While the language in the Texas bill is different, the outcome will be the same because the First Amendment protects against government intrusion into editorial discretion. Ari Cohen, Tech Freedom Council, said in a statement Wednesday, the bill was widely opposed by Democrats in Texas, but many did not attend the vote as they protested other controversial measures led by Republicans.
And Tyler, as I mentioned in the other room on this, is a second federal issue, which is I think both laws violate the Congress's unilateral ability to regulate interstate commerce, because this is basically interstate commerce. So I don't think state legislatures can operate here, but that's just my view.
Yeah, I think Ken's right on the legality of this, but the politics of it are what's kind of more interesting. I mean, as the tech companies increasingly become scapegoats for the far left and the far right in the U.S., you're starting to see more legal challenges win out. I mean, we've seen CDA 230 challenges successful in a number of states now. We've obviously seen them change CDA 230. And so I think, obviously, the politics of this are very fascinating and interesting because everyone sort of thinks that they're being censored or shadow banned or what have you. Not that their content isn't all that good. And of course, this went from a fringe idea. I sued Twitter and lost in 2015 after they gave me a lifetime ban over using a metaphor, which is deeply ironic because now I do deals with Jack Dorsey, but whatever. But what's interesting about this is the argument I was making a long time back is that the federal government needs to take responsibility for a lot of these platforms and decisions that are made. That the tech companies can't kind of do both and so either the federal government is in control of the tech platforms, as we're seeing in other countries, or they're not. And if they're not, then they're sort of in this kind of weird category where they can just keep growing. And I should just say one final thing on this. One of my friends, she's kind of a nut, but she's a friend of mine, which is Laura Loomer, who's the most banned woman from social media platforms. She announced yesterday, coincidentally or not, that she was running for Congress in a district she's likely to win. Last time she ran in President Trump's district, and President Trump voted for her, but she of course lost because it was a very Democratic district. So we're seeing the change, being kind of meted out here, and culturally, I think the culture will drive.
Tyler.
Tying in with that, well, Charles, if you come back with things, I'll stop with things. But one thing that was kind of interesting is, in Europe they have when they started to say, hey, we got GDPR type kind of things we can kick in. One of the provisions was that you have to have all of your data essentially stored locally on local servers and local data centers. And China insists on something similar, essentially at a later point with stuff. I'm almost imagining if they were actually competent with this legislation, I don't think they're actually going to do this, but it would be interesting if they started saying, no, you'd have like Texas data servers and Texas, border things or whatever. And so they can make
my
sure
friend
that
wrote
stays there.
my friend wrote the Texas law, and what they were sort of telling me was they intend to have a Supreme Court challenge on this. And
yeah, it seems designed for that.
Abbott sees it as politically popular enough that he's going to run for president in a few years' time. And so when he runs for president, he will actually have this as a thing in his quiver. And of course, the other state that has this is Ron DeSantis in Florida, who's of course also going to run for president in 2024.
Yep.
Well, as someone born in Texas, this is Texas grandstanding at a whole new level. This and a number of other legislative things that Texas has done. Look at they basically, with the help of the Supreme Court, just overthrew Roe Wade last night or this past few days. So, Texas
David, as you know, that the Roe v. Wade challenge is also a challenge that's going to go up to the Supreme Court. But
Supreme Court, yeah, but wait. So there's two ways that the Supreme Court handles things. One is kind of a quick, either they don't address it or they do, and in their action, I mean, read about this from the punditry. In the way that they handled this, they actually let it roll, which means that within women have only 6 weeks, right? And so a lot of women don't even know they're pregnant within 6 weeks. So effectively, what the left, or not the left, what pro-choice advocates have been, concerned about, basically happened this week. So
it happened last night. That's what maybe some people didn't see. It was very late last night, and by a 5-4 vote, they made a decision not to enjoin the law.
Right,
but they're letting people. They're going to let people bring cases, but there has to be like an aggrieved party. So the way that the Texas law was written, it isn't the government of Texas that's precluding the abortion. It just allows for private lawsuits from people not even involved in the situation to sue, doctors and even the mother, I guess, who's involved in the abortion. So it's a very unique structure. And because of that unique legal structure, they basically said it's too early or whatever. So we're just not going to enjoin the law.
It's designed to cause chaos. It's not designed to arrive at any sort of conclusion.
It'd be very nice to have some female opinions on this, especially if they have any political opinions associated with it.
Briefly turning over to that, just very briefly, the thing is that essentially there's actually resolving underlying issues or underlying matters. But the thing is that there's sorts of legislations that are not made in good faith; they're made in bad faith because the argument, the goal is not to actually resolve a cultural consensus. It's designed to cause splitting along issues and to keep that issue alive for as long as possible to basically signal tribal affiliation. The longer that happens, the easier to settle the base.
Look, majorities of Texans, support this law, and there's, in a lot of countries, most of our European and sort of other countries won't know this, but in the U.S., you can essentially get an abortion up to birth, and that's a sort of controversial topic, obviously, in the U.S. And I don't think, there are a number of even liberal scholars who made the argument that Roe v. Wade was sort of wrongly decided, that it should be a state by state issue. I'm not sure what's going to happen here, but I do think that the court probably made the wise decision, which was not to block the law, but to let legal challenges proceed. And I guess we'll see, as things go on here.
Tyler, can we get back to the tech headlines?
Yeah, I was referring more to the tech headline aspect with that, but yeah.
Okay, so next one up is UK's ICO now mandates websites and apps comply with its children privacy design code or face fines up to £17.5 million or 4% of annual worldwide turnover. In the UK, a 12-month grace period for compliance with a design code aimed at protecting children's online expires today. So, meaning app makers offering digital services in the market, which are likely to be accessed by children, meaning under 18, are expected to comply with a set of standards intended to safeguard kids from being tracked and profiled. The age-appropriate design code, aka the Children's Code, came into force on September 2nd. Last year, however, the UK's data protection watchdog, the ICO, allowed the maximum grace period for hitting compliance to give organizations time to adapt their services, meaning today. But from today, it expects the standards of the code to be met. Services where the code applies can include connecting toys and games and edtech, but also online retail and for-profit online services such as social media and video sharing platforms, which have a strong pull for minors. Among the code's stipulations are that a level of high privacy should be applied to settings by default if the user is or expected to be a child, including specific provisions that geolocation and profiling should be off by default, unless there's a compelling justification for such privacy hostile defaults. The code also instructs app makers to provide parental controls while also providing the child with age-appropriate information about such tools, warning against parental tracking tools that could be used to silently and visibly monitor a child without them being made aware of the active tracking. Other standards take aim at dark pattern design, which are with a warning to app makers against using nudge techniques to push children to provide unnecessary personal data or weaken or turn off their privacy protections. The full code contains 15 standards, but is not itself baked into legislation. Rather, it's a set of design recommendations the ICO wants app makers to follow. So that starts today. Okay, so the next one up is from Slate. This is a breaking news one. It says, a look at Wikimedia's, which is the maker of Wikipedia, Wiki Functions, expected to launch in 2022, which could help partially unify information across the 323 individual language Wikipedias. Wikipedia has 323 language editions, and at times there are huge differences between them. And this is an effort to basically unite them. Wikipedia is trying to transcend the limits of human language.
I should note that when you're looking, this was something that when we did a lot of studies on this earlier this year with things, that fact that there's differences was extremely valuable, because when bad faith actors essentially are doing like, let's do a simple version, we're doing like PR firms, they're trying to clean up someone's article. That's one aspect, but there's a lot more insidious versions where you have like state-based actors that basically alter history. What's really interesting is it's a pain to check all the other translations and all the other side versions and go through all it. So typically things get lost, and that is very valuable when you're trying to actually have some accountability. The edit histories for Wikipedia have not received a UX update in almost 15 years. And I find this actually astounding, despite the fact that we've basically put all this effort collectively into let's fix misinformation. Let's basically, solve this. Let's solve that with stuff. Let's send people to this. And then essentially like Google, multi-billion dollars and everything approaching $1 trillion market cap. It can't be arsed to basically send a single UX designer over to Wikipedia to basically check the edit history, which is one of the main ways that Wikipedia actually uses for validating whether something's true or not. This is also a responsibility factor.
People track this sort of thing, and there are lots of foreign governments that edit Wikipedia to target individuals that they don't like, be they Americans, be they others. I myself have been a target of this by foreign governments. Actually, I think 2 foreign governments, the Rwandans and the Israelis, which is kind of funny. But yes, so I mean, this is a real thing, and people should pay attention to it.
Watch what happens for the unification if they're trying to connect the language together, specifically because language is something that has extreme political connotations. And essentially when someone says, we want to basically connect it together, you can very subtly alter things that have massive implications. This is one of the ways that China actually exercises internal dissent control. It's also the way that essentially things on the far left exercise it. There's things that, here in America, there's other ways in Europe. Essentially, it was used to basically go to a post-World War II order. Anyways, that's getting way off topic. But the key part is that watch what happens when people say we want to basically shift how language is used. It can be very powerful and very subtle.
My college roommate was John McWhorter, my first year of business school. I love the guy, regardless of what his thoughts are.
John's great.
But he taught me something about I'm sorry?
John's great.
Yeah. And
good friend, good guy.
Yeah, what he taught me, one of the things was that language is organic and it evolves. So what I think is going to be really fascinating is the flip side of that. And as we can start to use some means to, I guess, unify how we're communicating, how it might evolve. So, for what it's worth.
Okay. Pardon my chewing here. The next one's from TechCrunch. Berlin Brands Group, which buys and scales e-commerce businesses, raises $700 million at a $1 billion valuation. Notice the pattern here.
Tyler's hilarious.
Wait, 700 million on 1 billion?
Yeah.
They gave away a lot.
Yeah. They raised $700 million in equity and debt at a $1 billion plus valuation led by Bain. So maybe it's 1.4, so they'd be giving away half. But yeah, I thought the same when I first read it. So the next one is from Bloomberg. China's Weibo shuts down at least 52 stock tipping accounts, including one with 3.25 million followers, to comply with new rules on finance-related information. Move is part of a campaign to cleanse harmful online content. Pundits have touted advice on indexes, stouts, and whatever.
Wait, does this mean Mad Money, like Kramer, wouldn't work over there?
Yeah, like that, yeah.
Bye.
The next one is a juicy one. Reddit bans the community called No New Normal, its largest anti-vax subreddit, for harassing other communities following weeks of user moderators asking Reddit admins to ban it. It's also putting 54 other communities in quarantine. Last week, more than 1,000 subreddit posted the same message calling for Reddit CEO to take action against this community called No New Normal. And generally, the anti-vax waves happening in Reddit as a platform, to which the CEO responded and said, no, dissent and contrarian views are part of Reddit. We're not going to do anything about it. Have fun. And then,
advertisers drive engagement when you have everyone pissed at each other. We're not going to mess with their core business model.
And then,
no, I mean, I know Steve, and I think he's pretty good on these things. I mean, I did not agree with the decision to ban the Donald at the time, but I think now, in retrospect, I think it was probably the right decision given how toxic that platform became. But I do think that there are real interesting questions here about how we know whether or not things are scientifically correct or not that need to be sort of adjudicated in the open market. And I think Reddit is a good place for that.
So what happened today is the banning of this. Well, basically, since here's the play-by-play. It's a tennis match. The ball started on one side of the court, and they said, hey, Reddit, take down all of this COVID misinformation. Reddit responded back saying, no, we're not going to do that. Then they said, okay, then we're going to shut down all of our very popular communities inside of Reddit. And they did. And some of them have 10 million followers or members in those communities. Many of them have more than 1 million, and a whole lot more have 500,000. So a bunch of the really popular communities in Reddit were kind of going dark. And then 24 hours later, Reddit does shut down the main anti-vax subreddit, which is called No New Normal. However, very notably, they didn't shut it down for a content issue. They shut it down for harassing other communities. That they said, we looked at the data and we noticed something very interesting. That the members of that community that you're all asking us to shut down, that you're all threatening to leave our platform if we don't shut down, turns out we can shut them down because they were violating our policy of not harassing members of Reddit. So we're shutting them down, but not for the reason you're asking us to. We're shutting
What
them.
a surprise. I'm shocked.
Yeah.
It's like Al Capone and tax evasion.
Hang on. I got something on this historical thing. So protests of November 16th, 2011. Let's go way back in time, 10 years ago to the magical pre-COVID era. There was the SOPA PIPA protests. They basically called this the American Censorship Day, and this was a big internet-wide protest where essentially they were saying SOPA PIPA, Hollywood is about to get legislation that will allow them to censor user-generated content sites, and this is the worst thing ever. Light up the phones of your local congressman, take your website offline, and show them a vision of the future what happens if we let Hollywood dictate the norms of the internet. This is DRM, it's all these other things, but the big thing was saying human rights, free expression, free speech, everything. It's really weird, honestly, very, very strange for me. 10 years later, watching the same tactics, the same sort of like ethos, the same sort of thing, but it's being used for the exact opposite technical position. In hindsight, I'm kind of feeling a little used, to be honest, because I was one of those people that called, the local congressman type kind of thing, kind of gets local communities involved. I don't think it was ever about human rights to begin with. I don't think it was
No,
about freedom of expression.
it was about Silicon Valley putting the hit out on Hollywood, and
Exactly.
now everyone's on Netflix, and like, who wants to buy a movie studio? I mean, Amazon just did it.
Exactly. So what you're seeing is that when you're seeing those same tactics work for the exact opposite thing, also weirdly having that human rights type kind of vibe, but it's saying something the complete opposite position. I am seeing some very disingenuous type of things happening here, which conveniently do not basically disempower the platforms where the discussion is occurring. And it seems much more that it's like, I don't think that the people involved actually give a shit. They just want to see this basically go away so they can keep making money. And I really, really don't like essentially the fact that they're basically conscripting the voices of the masses in order to basically use this, because that is very deceptive to all that energy that could be used for actual political action. And then they'll say, I at least did my part. And it's like, you basically just helped a company make more money. Where was all that civic virtue when you actually needed to, vote or actually organize? That's a whole separate thing. But yeah.
Back in the
Tyler.
90s. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Tyler, can you check the hand raise? Evan raised his hand.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, David.
I was just going to take people into another one of my time machines. In the 90s, back when the games were really getting lots of traction in the PC gaming space, you had all kinds of different titles doing different things. And Tipper Gore helped Congress kind of catalyze the beginning of all the ratings, if you guys might remember some of that.
Oh, yes.
So I think ratings, and with the right GUI or what have you, would be very helpful to help parents of young children, to help manage even these political conversations as well. GUI with some way of rating content and things would help content moderation and help people, I think, go to the rooms that they're interested in a little bit more without the hard door slam, perhaps.
I would make it illegal for the pharmaceutical industry to advertise in the U.S., just as it's illegal in almost every other country in the world for them to do such a thing. And I think that drives a lot of content decisions, both in corporate media and on corporate ad-supported platforms.
Oh, interesting. There might actually be some silent lobbying support from that, where the pharma lobbying groups, I didn't think through that with things, but the pharma lobbies have extreme amounts of financial interest in the advertising law and how it's structured. They might actually be silently actually intervening in some of these tech versus the world type kinds of issues about one way or the other, because they really have an interest in not accidentally having the laws basically de facto infringe on their stuff with things, because they like having that capability.
Chris, they absolutely are. So just to make an absolute technical call, because I know this issue very well because I remember when it changed. Prior to 1997, okay, you couldn't really advertise like on TV. You certainly couldn't advertise pharmaceuticals because the disclaimers had to be in certain like really big lettering that would make it inefficient. So they lobbied the FCC to get this like really, really small print. So when you watch the stuff now, it makes it easier for them to advertise. But Charles is right. We're one of only, I think, 2 countries. I think the other one's New Zealand that allows this to happen. No other country allows this to happen.
But they have a lot of money to throw around. They're probably influencing some of these.
I don't disagree. I mean, I've seen it happen.
I haven't even taken this into account. It's blindingly obvious now that you put it out with stuff. That's amazing.
So let's think about this logically, okay? You have one of the most powerful companies in the world, or a series of the most powerful companies in the world, who has the ability to use their power to shut down conversations about a topic, and then they can't be sued if that product is mandated to everyone, which everyone must take that product. Now, I don't know about you, but that seems kind of a recipe for disaster when you're talking billions of dollars and the corruption of our conversation. And I think people are rightly pointing out the corruption of our conversation on things like fossil fuels and on big food. But I think we need to be very, very careful here, and certainly the government has been wrong before. I mean, look at all the FDA recalls throughout history. Just something to think about.
Okay, so here's the one. ProPublica actually published this recently with things, and I can get the exact article title, but essentially the gist of it was that essentially a lot of attention has been looked at essentially how the fossil fuel industry has basically corrupted a lot of the conversation around climate change by basically sponsoring scientists so they can't basically do conflict of interest things, or like others that they basically muddy the waters and all the other aspects like that. And that's been covered to death. What is interesting is that the way the fossil fuel industry actually hires economists specifically to basically thwart the pricing models, so that when a politician looks at what's the actual price of solving climate change, they see a price tag that's way too high, and then they look at essentially the solution for doing nothing, which is not doing anything, and then say the price tag very, very different, and the economists basically modeling the economic effects being actually acting in bad faith has received very little coverage. In fact, when ProPublica was starting to actually dive deep on this, they were finding all sorts of fascinating things. What would be really interesting, I think, of an extreme public value on this is looking specifically at the pharma companies, specifically at history, I would say probably pre-COVID legislation for advertising specifically, and how that influences tech policy. Because I'll bet you, if you followed that thread, you would probably come back to essentially where we're at today with the COVID stuff, but you would find essentially which actors are actually moving the needles on this. Because I think that's going to be a really interesting segment. This is not a factor of just like, the COVID or anti-vax type kind of thing. The long-term thing, as Charles was saying, the mandatory requirement aspect of buying a product, when you can basically shape public health policy with that has long-term implications, especially when you're basically saying about the ability to discuss whether or not that essentially should be mandated or not. There's probably some really good stuff in that direction.
Look, if you're a monopoly and you can't be sued, like, what's the incentive to treat your customers well? Is there one?
There's a really good example of what you just mentioned, which is the HPV vaccine. It is almost becoming universal. I don't know which states now are mandating it, but there's a whole public health education campaign and a pharma-based education campaign around the uptake of that vaccine, which is only, I don't know how long. I guess the first introduction of it was probably a decade ago. So it's an interesting example.
My favorite example of this is all the Sacklers and how they basically for years said opioids, there were no problems with opioids. Opioids are fine. They would target and destroy doctors that spoke out. This is kind of relayed in Phil O'Keefe's book, Empire of Pain, which I highly recommend. And of course, we know that opioids, especially for our Scots-Irish sort of redneck population, are highly, highly genetically addictive. And so, people are dying, 500,000, plus, people have died because of opioid addiction. And, of course, nobody cares. And that's just, on to the next thing.
The fact that the Sackler family has not been jailed is ridiculous. I mean, I think the latest thing what the Sackler family did was they were saying, how about in exchange for us giving up, say like half, maybe not even half, but like half of the money we made from all the dead people, we basically get lifetime legal immunity for us, our family, and 1,000 of our corporate people. And for not just from this, but for every potential product, lawsuit, or anything else in the future, and then do it as a civil lawsuit thing and try to basically translate this into criminal immunity. I mean, it's like breathtaking how far, like, when you've got that much money, the kind of lawyers you can buy off, the politicians, the court stuff, because this is basically a unified action for attorney generals in multiple states. I mean, it's astounding.
So if you think about that,
injustice.
So in the case of the Sacklers, I mean, they bought off the FDA. Like, they're people from the FDA who went to go work for them immediately after they approved, things that the FDA wanted. So, I mean, just think about that, and the way in which people can get bought off. And think about corrupt countries, third world countries where people are bought off by the drug trade, be it Afghanistan with heroin or Mexico with cocaine. And ask yourself, would such a thing ever happen in the United States? I leave it to others to ponder.
Okay. The next headline.
I want to make a quick point that the Sacklers did get sued. So when Charles is talking about these exemptions where you can't get sued, it's where you have immunity. I'm not saying it's good or bad. Just as a technical point, it's only on vaccines that there's that kind of legal immunity, not other drugs.
That's true. And they did try to use the 1986 law, if I recall correctly, Ken. But you're right. They did ultimately get sued, and there are a number of states and countries now that have brought legal actions against them.
But now they're positioning themselves as potentially going bankrupt, which would make them not so easy to collect on any kind of damages or whatever.
They did
should
go
be in
bankrupt.
jail.
They are in bankruptcy.
If there was any sort of justice in the world, when you basically kill or are responsible for the deaths of 100,000 people or more, there would actually be some sort of like physical retribution. But we're in a
well,
just
I don't know.
society.
I don't know. Like, in fairness, a lot of the decisions that were made by the Sackler clan were made by people who are now dead, right? Like, they're sort of beyond the scope of justice. And to what extent do the sins of the father pass on to the son and to the daughters? I mean, that's sort of a question of biblical significance.
We never got full discovery. That's the thing about this. Essentially, it was artfully crafted in a way where even just the damning pieces were those were the cleaned up versions for stuff. They've never had proper actual going through the whole thing. And the reason why this is a big issue is that if this is basically de facto setting a precedent, not necessarily in the every single court has to rule this way, but in a if we can't even throw them in jail for things for egregious abuses with stuff, is like anything holding less than that is pretty much de facto a clean slate with things like go for it kind of thing, which is a terrible thing for justice.
Okay, next headline seems boring, but I'm mentioning it for a reason. It's from Bloomberg, a company called Homelight, which offers AI-powered tools for home buyers, home sellers, and real estate agents, raises $100 million at a $1.6 billion valuation. Again, you've heard this headline 1,000 times here in tech news around the world. Some startup, AI-powered, keep that part in mind, AI, because of another headline coming up soon. Homelight, which offers AI-powered tools for home buyers and sellers, raises $100 million at a $1.6 billion valuation. Okay. Store that in your data bank in the back. Okay. We'll come back to that. Next one's from New York Times, that former Alibaba staff say that casual sexism is common, and sources say that Alibaba fired 10 staff for leaking info on a rape allegation. And Alibaba, how many employees does Alibaba have? If someone can look that up. I imagine it's...
I think more than 10.
Yeah, it's north of 100,000. So, finding some...
A few more.
Here, yeah, they could potentially... It's similar to Amazon, which I think is approaching 1 million. So they could have 1 million employees at Alibaba.
Amazon has a policy of hire to fire, where they're literally they don't want to change changeover, so they'll hire people just so they have them waiting in the wings in case they need to hit their internal performance review staff ranking.
They also intentionally lay off 6% every year, so you have a whole hordes of people who have been fired from Amazon essentially, or let go. Keep that in mind, because imagine how difficult would it be of a company with 1 million people who fire 6% every year? Do you think you as a journalist could find 5 people to say that Jeff Bezos is a bad person? Yes, you could, very easily. 6% of 1 million people?
Amazon had the best term ever for it. They said it was unregretted attrition.
That's what they call it, yes. It's intentional. It's not only unregretted, it's intended. It's intentional attrition. So, strategic attrition. So, the point is that tech journalists feel like they have struck journalistic gold when they find a disgruntled former employee of a big tech company, not realizing statistically, I could find 5 former Amazon employees that think they are Jesus Christ. I can find 5 former Amazon employees who think Jeff Bezos is in fact a lizard person.
But hold up, Tyler, though. Isn't there a line here for whistleblowers as well?
Sure.
Right? I mean,
but that would be the whistleblowers would be current employees.
They bring data with them too.
Not necessarily current.
Not necessarily, but that would be journalistically much more impressive, because finding disgruntled employees from a company of 1 million people, you can find batshit, technically schizophrenics who used to work at that company who will literally say any fucking thing you can imagine. So and
maybe a few who still work there who will say anything. Correct. You can imagine.
Correct. So forgive me, New York Times, that of your headline, your narrative crafting of Alibaba staff. Now, I'm going to actually now flip 180 degrees and defend you, New York Times, with this article, because You found a former Alibaba staff who say that casual sexism is common. I'm actually going to defend you on this. Of all the things you could find for Chinese people to agree on, you can throw a rock and hit a Chinese person who would agree that casual sexism is not only common in Alibaba, it's incredibly all over China, which has very little to do with Alibaba. All of China
All over the world.
has a
We
massive
don't need to throw rocks about this. There's plenty of things.
China itself is plagued with casual sexism in and outside of Alibaba. So
worse in the U.S., Tyler?
Finding former Alibaba staff who say that casual sexism is common, that's like saying they actually serve food in the cafeteria. They have water that they serve inside the actual headquarters. Yeah, of course there's casual sexism all over China. And this is a headline of the New York Times?
Well, I mean, there's this
some of us owe our existences to casual sexism. My mother worked for my father. I'm very happy it worked out and that there were no Me Too laws in effect.
Look, there's a whole thing on here essentially where we have decades of this stuff basically leading up where we've basically been ignoring it. The narrative that a lot of people had about China, like for the thing while we were paying attention to every other country on the planet, was, oh yeah, they make the cheap shit at Walmart with things. And it's like occasionally there'd be a thing about, oh yeah, you can make money over there. And then all at once there's this, holy shit, there's a rival country over there. We should learn what's going on over there. And this is the crack squad of journalists that weren't paying shit attention to anything. They're going, wait, is there other publications aside from the business journals? Wait, don't we write those? Oh wait, there's other aspects to Chinese culture. Maybe we should get caught up on that. Is that a thing now? And it's remarkable watching the public education occurring right now.
It's like us 400 million Americans aren't the only opinion that matters on a globe of 8 billion. Like, wait, this is news to me.
Well, for a while it was, because we had the military thing. We were told, the end of history. This is the thing of saying every government in the world become like us because we rock as a thing. Okay, I guess we can sit on our asses and don't have to do anything about it now. And that's going, oh shit, they've got a military too. They've got fishing boats. They've got nukes. They've got, oh wow, and they don't want to come to negotiation tables as much as Russia did. Okay, this is fun.
It's the point I think Tyler's making, though, is just the old guard's it's influencer point. I think with regards to the New York Times and some of the old guard reporters, media people, and in contrast to some of the new, I would think is one way to look at this as well. And it would be interesting. I mean, I used to go to Google News a lot, just to try to get a quick spattering of different types of outlet headlines, right? But it would be interesting if somebody can, I'm sure it already exists, or if, like you're saying, Charles, Reddit works effectively in this space. If there is some kind of a AI-powered news percolation service that actually kind of gets all the misinformation and keeps that out of the way, but percolates with credible influencers and credible information, that would be something that'd be really great if it's out there already. That'd be great.
Something that's actually really useful is if we actually, our language tools got to a point where it's like, AI translation, we took it far enough, we translated some UN documents, maybe we'll throw a neural net or two at this. But the amount of lack of attention in that space, despite the groundbreaking amount of influence it would have, it gets lower priority because it's actually more useful to keep populations segmented for ads, propaganda, etc. But one of the more interesting things is that when you do selective propaganda, you do different propaganda domestically and foreign. And this is really telling when you basically are reading original translations or basically original things from other countries. This is getting to be somewhat astounding, though, is the divergence between when you're realizing that you can literally read front page publications, and you're realizing that you're actually going farther in depth than the fucking journalists that are responsible for keeping everyone else informed about how these things are supposed to occur. So they will literally, in China, they will literally have the state mandate, the state, not state mandate. This is the government publication announces to all of the publications in China. And they all have to carry this line, right? And they say, we are now going to do policy X. And then essentially gets carried out and everything's happening. And then all of a sudden it gets translated into English. Officially, maybe, I don't know, 2-3 years later, and everyone is shocked in the West. How could China do this with things? We never saw it coming. And the thing it was comical at first, but now it's getting sad because you're realizing that while historically journalists would basically have like groups in foreign and news bureaus that basically where you'd have like local exchanges happening in different countries and stuff, and you'd say, oh, by the way, this thing is happening here, this thing is happening here. They literally have been half-assing it for so long that they can't even have the official government things that are basically coming through, let alone the cultural nuance parts, let alone essentially the compacts for soft power aspects. So it's literally been just business publications. That's it. It's astounding. And now the collective blind spot, as they try to rectify that, is really starting to bleed over into every other aspect. Like Tyler, we talk about here in Tech News around the world a lot about. It's like, oh, it's not about the education. It's not about the edtech sector. It's about the fertility factor. It's not about essentially. It's not about antitrust things for China. It's about consolidation of power for the party. There's a lot of aspects to this that if we don't have that foundational grounding, it gets to be very difficult to understand any of the aspects involved. And our journalistic groups have failed us dramatically. And when the new groups like Google said, we can replace the journalist, you don't need to have those gatekeepers, let's crowdsource the hell out of this thing, citizen journalism this up, we can basically fulfill that social role. They did not fulfill their part of the social contract for basically saying we're going to keep learning those AI tools or any of the other things that they promised. So anyways, that's a long rant getting off my soapbox here. It's astounding watching groups playing catch up here on the New York Times and stuff.
Okay, other headlines here. Bloomberg says they have sources that Twitter is testing a new privacy-focused tools, including archiving and hiding old tweets without deleting them, and editing follower lists as part of a social privacy push. Features give users more control over who sees which posts, and social privacy push targets reputation and identity management. And my whole list just got rejiggered as America is waking up right now. Charles, here's one for you. Bloomberg says a look at Alfie, which plans to use facial detection to target ads in public places based on age, gender, and ethnicity. Activists say the tech invites abuse. The artificial intelligence software company uses metrics like age and gender to target highly specific ads to people in public places based on facial detection.
Tyler, how would anyone go off the grid? And
get in the car and drive.
No, the license plate is tracked on the back of your car. It's also a smart vehicle that checks in with the new 5G network.
Make sure.
Oh, and by the way, essentially, as you pass over the gas station, they've got facial recognition on security cameras.
Did Charles just jump out? Where'd Charles go?
Say facial recognition 3 times. Maybe he'll appear.
Facial recognition, facial recognition, facial recognition. Where'd Charles go? Oh, shit.
Okay, I'll pin him again.
Yeah, just as we were...
Tyler, before he comes back, I just want to add to this that a lot of what we're talking about are just technological innovations on stuff that was always done. So, for example, newspapers would give you demographics on their subscribers, and we had Nielsen ratings, which are now in the dumps for television, Arbitron ratings for radio, and they all had demographic data, particularly about age and everything. So this is not exactly new.
It's a difference between applying to a focus group of like, here's 100 people, or here's a statistically significant sample size of 1,000 people, and every fucking citizen in the world, regardless of whether or not they consented to basically having these sorts of tracking systems.
I'm trying to ping in Charles too, because
it looks great from the customer perspective of them buying it, but it's not the customers, it's the users, and those are different social classes.
When I was trying to get Charles in, he's saying he had to go pretty soon, so I think he's out.
That sucks. We just
but he's still online, so I texted him already.
All right. Well, let's hope he comes in because that's a competitor to Clearview, and they're using it.
Have you ever had like Charles in the same room as we have some privacy lawyers with things and have them go at each other? I'd be really fascinated because they both like Charles has so much unique knowledge that very few people in the world have, and I also feel like there's some privacy legal things that basically very few people know about outside of essentially some very specialized things being crafted right now. It'd be fascinating to hear some discussions on that.
Look at Alfie, because
what do you want to hear, Chris? Because I am a privacy lawyer, so following all this, I mean, it's just I don't jump in on a lot of it, but like. Yeah, it's fascinating.
There was a headline yesterday that IKEA just invested in Alfie, which no, I'm sorry. IKEA just invested in a buy now pay later, not Alfie. Different company, similar name. Okay, moving on. Biden administration says Mina Xiang will lead the U.S. digital service, working on crisis across the government. Hsing previously worked on healthcare.gov's rescue team. Well, let's hope she was the one who saved that site from its abysmal initial poor performance, which was truly horrific. But it did get salvaged in the end. But oh my God, was that a tragedy when it started? And let's hope she wasn't responsible for that. So, China's Weibo shuts down at least 52 stock tipping sites. We covered that. Some Black LinkedIn users complain of algorithmic bias, saying their posts are not appearing on the site or are being taken down repeatedly. Huh? Wow. LGBTQ activists say that the UK's online safety bill could provide the legal basis for censorship of LGBTQ content, and say ending online anonymity could harm queer users. Okay. And
this was actually one of the things that caused Ello. I don't know if people remember that way back in the day with things. They had that whole thing with it annoyed Zuckerberg for exactly a month. They're saying we're going to be the new social media platform. It ended up being adoption in like a very small finance sector. The growth rate was spectacular, but then they said, we don't want to become a big company. We're kind of being a little one. It was very unusual. But the one of the big things that shifted that was Facebook had recently made a true names policy for identification, which took basically all the trans community, and they said, no, frack this, we're going to find a new platform thing. And they actually took a surprising number of people with them. I think the way that Facebook quelled it is they made an offer through the VC group to kind of say, hey, can you keep these guys distracted for a while? And they went away after that. But that anonymity and the privacy aspect has very real implications for the LGBTQ community. And it's interesting because when you see all those companies flying those rainbow flags essentially during Pride Month, actually see what they actually implement for their actual policies, and it's like, yeah, this was a marketing department thing. If you actually want to see actual things, don't just talk about HR. Go talk essentially to the biz dev people, see if they're actually using those friendly policies, and it doesn't always translate.
Okay, so remember I was talking about how that AI company raised a bunch of money? So here's why. Now listen to this headline here. 300 plus organizations are urging the EU to redefine key terms in the draft AI Act, this massive new policy about AIs in the EU. So they want to redefine key terms in the AI Act, asking the EU to label more AI systems as high risk and ban some forms of AI entirely. The fight to define when AI is high risk. This is from Wired magazine, wired.com. Everyone from tech companies to churches want a say in how the EU regulates AI that could, quote unquote, harm people. And this is a huge ordeal. The EU is going to try and make regulations around AI to stop bad AI generally and all the potential bad uses. And they're listening to everybody, like they say, churches and everybody else. And I mentioned that previous AI company, which just became a new unicorn, because the tech companies and the investors, the startups and entrepreneurs and investors are saying, please don't regulate AI. Please, 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 because China's really not going to. And America's not really going to. And AI is the future of innovation on everything. And it's likely to solve all kinds of problems and take us, into a new renaissance and beyond. It will make the social change of the Renaissance pale by comparison. And the Alpha DeepFold project already is proving that. Actually, it's doing more for medicine than the past 10,000 years combined. So please be careful in how you regulate AI. So this is, and there's a lot of worried people that the EU is going to shoot itself in the fucking face with a shotgun by regulating AI and forcing anyone doing AI to leave, basically. And that's I honestly,
regulation doesn't have to be a bad thing, and this is actually one of the interesting parts. If you intentionally kneecap the competence of essentially the groups doing the regulating, if you intentionally staff with basically groups that do not understand the underlying issue,
here's the problem.
That type kind of thing.
Here's the problem: the EU, as it does, is shaping up to try and stop job losses due to AI. That's part of this is part of the problem. So you have all the unions, which are very, very powerful in the EU, looking at any AIs that could potentially cause job losses and say, that's a bad one.
Interesting.
Right.
I
So
wouldn't categorically.
And Tyler,
yes.
only today in England we have a huge problem with lorries and delivery systems.
Right. Perfect
There are not
example.
enough drivers.
Autonomous
We need
cars. Perfect example.
exactly. We need that.
Perfect
There's a
There's
example.
need.
actually there's a weird argument to be made that essentially having like, you know, when you're running an experiment, you have your controls, you have your try different versions out kind of thing. If everyone runs the same build, it can be like very damaging. There is actually interesting argument to be made saying, how about you try a version of the AI where you actually have the strong labor laws and you have this strong thing,
So what
and
if
you take it a little bit slower just to see how it turns out? Because I'm actually really curious what will happen compared to the USA or China experiments or Africa.
So which country will be the first country to become Amish? To protect their economy.
Well, hang on, Tyler. Hang on. Hey, whoa, horsey. Whoa, horsey.
Yeah, that's what the Amish say. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. Shit. That is what they say, but look, there are different scenarios moving forward that we can embrace. And I'm speaking on behalf of the, I don't know, 30 plus or minus percent of the world population that are blue collar, that, and not just them, right? I mean, if you go talk to a doctor. Let's talk to a skin doctor, radiologist looking for cancer.
Fair enough.
So, but it's not. But fair enough. But it's not going to be fair enough. Is the point? You know. And this AI, you can't. We're still not at a point where we have driverless cars. So I mean, there is a way to let this unfold where you have the AI assist a human. So all I want to say is there's different scenarios, and there's absolutely a requirement to reconcile social justice and economic justice and not let the tech monster run amok if we do it right.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just saying that there's a bunch of tax, there's a bunch of ways to do it, and it's going to be complex, but I talk about deployment of commercial grade, deployment grade tech, right? Mm-hmm. We have a bunch of different factors to keep the Earth safe and keep each other kind of look out for each other as we continue to deploy tech. Sorry, so
here's the first paragraph of this Wired article. It says,
Tyler,
hang on. It says, people should not be slaves to machines. A coalition of evangelical church congregations from more than 30 countries preached to leaders of the European Union earlier this summer.
What the?
Yeah, I told you.
Where the hell have these people been?
Evangelical.
Yeah.
That's my
you thought I was joking about the Amish. The European Evangelical Alliance believes all forms of AI with the potential to harm people should be evaluated. And they're now addressing their concerns with the leaders of the European Union about
where the hell have these people been?
You thought I was joking.
Back to plowing.
I left evangelicalism to go doing tech stuff for a while. I was shocked at essentially how easy it was with things because everyone's like, "This is crazy." Where the hell have the AI evangelical people been here in America?
It's urged members of the European Commission for more discussion of what quote unquote considered safe and morally acceptable when it comes to augmented humans and computer brain interfaces. The evangelical group is one of more than 300 organizations to weigh in on the EU's Artificial Intelligence Act, which lawmakers and regulators introduced in April. The comment period of the proposal ended August 8th, and it will now be considered by the European Parliament and European Council, made up of heads of states of the EU member nations. The AI Act is one of the first major policy initiatives worldwide focused on protecting people from harmful AI. If enacted, it will classify AI systems according to risk, more strictly regulate AI that deems high risk to humans, and ban some forms of AI entirely, including real-time facial recognition in some instances. In the meantime, corporations and interest groups are publicly lobbying lawmakers to amend the proposal according to their interests. So it's a shit show.
But this is great because they've already accepted if they're already saying we're going to categorize it by risk, and then they may have people bickering over which subclass to get into. That means they actually have to reason out through what they're doing, which is spectacular. That it's already having an effect.
Yeah, but you're going to get anyone who feels they will be replaced by the AI are going to make their case for why it's a risk.
Sure, but they have to make the case. That's the thing that's awesome about that.
So the government legislative process is corrupt, probably everywhere, right? Here in the States, we've
some place more than others.
Well, but it's still it's lobbies have too much power, right? Lobbyists of any kind, right? So, but I just want to, regulations. You brought up a couple key topics to this, right? Which is, regulations are not necessarily always bad. Period. Full stop. I mean, they should just be called safety measures lots of times, right? Because when the wind blows a certain way in D.C., you get safety measures thrown out the freaking wind for profits, right? And when the winds blow the other way, they start to come back, and you have some safety measures that are maybe a little overbearing or something, right? So it's wise for us to integrate some kind of ethics at the table for AI deployment. I mean, Stanford has a whole entity. There are ethics in AI. I mean, this is absolutely what we should be doing. Will it be corrupt? Will it be? Yes, absolutely. And it's but they have to have a seat at the table. Full stop. Because AI is a total game changer for just everything, right? So
at least giving a shit and trying is a big deal. I had an earlier point, but this is a much more interesting discussion that we're having right now. But at an earlier point, just want to say very briefly, when Afghanistan, Taliban took over with things, one of the things they were freaking out about is like, oh no, they're getting the database of where all the citizens are and who complied with military stuff and who essentially is loyal to which group or whatever. And they're saying this could be used for targeting. In Germany, and specifically over after post World War II, this was basically a big thing when you basically take over a town during World War II. You would basically go and find the local, the census records office essentially, and figure out essentially how you're going to run the place with things. And there were purges that happened whenever East or West essentially took over a different area, and depending on how brutal the regime was with stuff, there are consequences from that. In the post World War II, the Stasi had the same kind of thing, and it was more for domestic suppression over longer term periods of time. Which for the East-West German culture divide, that was the physical wall divide. That was a big deal for reintegration because decades of that sort of cultural attitude change, not just the economic, but the cultural aspect of that was astounding. They had a third of the citizens basically spying on each other. We essentially have more so now with the current structure, but the key part I'm making very briefly, is that leaves a long-term cultural imprint that's not an old history. It's something relatively recent, and it will change how they view privacy as a concept. Will be conceptually different from where in America it's more of an abstraction. And Europe, it's more of a my grandfather was killed from those lists type kind of thing. So they're going they're going to basically treat it very, very differently.
That's the basis for GDPR, Chris. So that is actually the basis, and that's why they're so strong around GDPR and those requirements. And so people look at it and you go, no, it does have a real world, recent feel for people, right? So as you highlighted before, and also just to jump in on the AI stuff here, I haven't looked into their regulation, but you knew that Europe was going to be ahead of us on this because they did GDPR. It just makes sense that AI will follow, and it's not just going to robotics and who's replacing jobs or, machine learning. It's looking at as David said, it's the ethical AI and also understanding AI. So there's so many algorithms out there in AI that even the creators don't understand. They can't disclose how it got to a certain decision or what it's doing. And so it's that I know that's part of it. It's more of the ethics and disclosing how these things work so they can know how they are being rolled out and impacting society versus just saying if it, displaces, I didn't, that was my understanding is the focus, not an anti, taking away jobs or progressing focus.
Charles is back on
Yeah.
stage, Tyler.
Okay.
Tyler, just a quick example. There is a technique called generative adversarial network, which
Yeah.
creates all these deep
Amish,
fakes.
we were waiting for Charles to join us. I know he's got to run, so please pardon the interruption. So, Charles, there was a headline about Alfie, which plans to use facial detection to target ads in public places based on age, gender, and ethnicity. Activists say the tech invites abuses.
Yeah, it probably does. I mean, I would just say my view on facial rec is that it should only be used in the context of protection and not in the context of stimulating the ad economy. I mean, that's something I very much strongly believe. I would just say too, I think people are taking the Europeans at their word a little too sincerely. A lot of GDPR. I mean, if you go and you talk with people in the European Union about it, they'll admit after a couple of drinks, and I don't drink, so they get really chatty after you keep paying for the drinks. What you end up discovering is that they see it as a protectionist measure in large measure. Sure, there's like a sympathetic, kind of view, like we don't want Hitler to come back, but that's not really what's at play here. There's a sort of deliberate effort to kind of keep out both America and Chinese tech increasingly from their markets, and that's really what's going on here. But when it comes to advertisements, I mean, I don't believe that the internet should be built on ads. I think it should be built on subscription models generally, and so that's a sort of, and I don't believe people should be tracked unless it's in a compelling state function or something that's necessary, like, if somebody passes out and you clear view them or whatever, and you can discover their medical history so you know what kind of stroke they're having. That's kind of where I come down on this stuff.
Alrighty.
Hey, can I ask, Charles? Wait, can I ask? Is this Alfie thing doing it by facial recognition and biometrics, or is it pulling, like, a lot of people emit a lot of data from their phones just as they're walking around, right? And localized ads will pick that up. And again, I'm not a big supporter of ads. And then, as Charles said, this whole GDPR, it's actually, I mean, people love GDPR. They say they do, at least from certain angles, but it's had a huge detrimental effect. I mean, the cost of implementing that and the cost of
I can answer
small
it.
business.
Yeah, it says Alfie software is designed to show ads to people based on their age, gender, and ethnicity without specifically
so much liability.
without specifically identifying the person using small.
You look black. Let me sell you a certain ad. How is that going to go well?
Yeah.
I mean, just seriously.
And gender and age. Yeah.
I mean, the type of stuff that the tech companies already have on people would shock you. I mean, if you really get into the nitty gritty of it, and I highly recommend, looking into this stuff. Like there is no privacy anymore in the biometric age that we're in. Our voices are recorded, our likeness is recorded. The question is, of course, what are you going to do in this world in which there's biometric surveillance all over the place? Are you going to make it easier for people to get, queue up in line to get, government functions done? Or are you going to extort them and exploit them by discovering that they're alcoholics and selling them drinks? Right? Is that what you're going to do? That's the question.
On the solution side, I think Armish had something interesting to say about deepfakes. There's an interesting aspect of that. Armish, you want to say that?
Yeah, I'll just also respond to what Charles said. I'll just add to it. There is a startup which claims that they can do a lot of good underwriting just based on a couple of photos of the borrowers. And the guy claims to be working for NSA a long back. And then he saw that, okay, we used to identify the tech. We use that tech to identify terrorists. Now we are trying to identify, help banking and fintech do underwriting based on that. So there is a good use case as well. But having said that, coming back to the deepfakes, I think we now have a reasonable capabilities to create images and events which looks absolutely real but never could happen. So I think this is going to take a toll on our judicial system, that after a point when there would be so much of such videos and images out there, would a judicial system accept videos or images as proofs of something really happened? I don't think so. I think they would go back to the original way of establishing the truth. And there would be a natural pushback from society. And regulators can hold on to for some time to actually register all these bad consequences and take appropriate regulation. Because this thing is changing so fast that regulators won't be able to catch up that quickly. So let it come from the system itself and then start regulating instead of being proactive.
Okay. So other interesting headlines at the moment is we went through the big fight to define AI in EU, so stay tuned for that one. So now we get into the fun tweets that everyone's been sending in here, like this one, that Starlink India launch coming soon. Elon Musk's internet service in India. Musk replied to a Twitter post that the company is figuring out how the regulatory approval process in the country would work for Starlink in India. The next one, meet Emma, the AI robot masseuse, practicing ancient wellness therapies developed by Singapore-based startup called AI Treat. Emma, E-M-M-A, is a robot masseuse that uses sensors and 3D vision to deliver deep tissue massage. Holy shit, I want one of these. Yeah, I just tweeted out. You can see the robot masseuse, and you lay down on a table just like a normal massage, and it's a robot masseuse with a camera and an arm. Quite cool. You can see it from the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW. And Facebook and Apple smart glasses will soon be upon us. Facebook's boss Mark Zuckerberg expects the social media giant's products will eventually see the company considered a metaverse business. And, it says, but are they just another fad? Focusing on helping people participate in the virtual world, while Apple's Tim Cook has hinted he sees augmented reality as the next big thing in tech. Both Facebook and Apple's CEOs have both said it's the next big thing. And they are both expected, well, Facebook's is already out. We're also expecting Facebook's AR glasses before the end of the year in time for Christmas. And it's potentially possible.
That's what they say every year about AR glasses.
Yeah.
If you've been looking at the headlines,
No, apparently Facebook has promised it at this point.
This
though.
time for reals.
Yeah.
From Apple, from Google, from
Yeah.
Facebook, from it's AR glasses. It's very simple. They say Christmas season will increase our sales by X amount, and we'll say is can we meet this deadline? They rush the basically saying internally. I've seen this firsthand. They'll basically say, can we ship by the end of the year? And they say great, and they say wait, but we need when to hit the Christmas rush because that's when people actually buy, and so they move it up 2 months later, 2 months earlier, and they say wait a second, to have it ready by that we need to have the marketing for that done even before that, and so they move it up another to 2 to 4 months, and then the engineering team says there's no way we can hit that date, and then it ships to the next year, and it slips to that, and then
yeah, I've already seen 10 fake mock-ups. Come on, I want them.
We launch our first pair of sentences. So they're saying it should be ready by this year. Manufactured with premium eyewear brands Ray Brand and Luxottica.
They have the good backing with Luxottica thing. I'm just saying, with ship dates, never trust a hardware ship date from a company that has not had a reliable track record of shipping hardware. Facebook does have a hardware division, but they just so often shut them down as they do start them. The real. Yeah. If you have leaks from the actual provider of the hardware, like China, an iPhone shipping because their supplier's saying we're finishing the touches on the screen right now. When you see that sort of leak happening on the glasses, that's when you start paying really close attention and taking them seriously on their shipping dates.
In a recent earnings calls, Zuckerberg said that the Facebook glasses let you do some pretty neat things. And we are just a stepping stone away from full augmented reality glasses. Apple, meanwhile, has been filing patents for AR technologies for more than a decade. AR is big and profound, says Apple Chief Executive Tim. And Apple glasses aren't expected to launch as soon as Facebook's products, but with some analysts suggesting the device won't arrive until 2023. And Snapchat is coming out with theirs, Microsoft HoloLens, and others. So anyway, so the next article, thank you for that one, Sundamini Kumar. The next one's from Gareth, who joins us regularly in the audience, that the SEC boss tells the EU Parliament that crypto and fintech could be as disruptive as the internet itself. So they need to join. He makes a really interesting point that the blockchain is a global technology. So they need to work together to create a global regulation for it, was his point. And he's a professor at MIT specifically on blockchains. So hopefully they're paying attention. And he has a very valid point there. So the next one is from Tsunamini, that Qualcomm's aptX lossless compression promises CD quality sound over Bluetooth. So now your Bluetooth connection will be able to do really high quality audio.
Is this with existing Bluetooth or a future version?
It's a codex. It says so. Maybe with,
okay.
So with the same hardware, Qualcomm is updating its aptX Bluetooth codecs with lossless capabilities. That's fantastic.
So one of the weird things, if you actually look, so compression stuff is actually a really cool field, but if you ever look at like a bill of materials breakdown for the iPhone and who's paying for what, they actually break down the cost and saying, well, they spent this amount of money on the screen, this amount on the battery, this amount on essentially this chip. What's really interesting is often on these, they'll put a good, it's like 3% or 5% of the cost of the iPhone actually goes to licensing groups for the codecs. But it's billed as a hardware expense. It's basically built into the chip as a thing. But it's interesting because something that's that valuable, if you literally have basically a slightly better compression algorithm, much like the TV show Silicon Valley, it's a big deal because you can make old hardware sing. And if you can apply as a firmware update, hell, that's great.
Sadly, this won't work on the iPhone though. They have their own scheme for Bluetooth, with AirPods. So this is Android only.
It's still pretty cool when someone says, here's a thing, and every device on the planet that's under this brand or something automatically gets that kind of sort of capabilities just because we have better math. I mean, there's some really cool things that one of the magic things about AI that most people are not talking about that's a really big freaking deal. Everything from those general adversarial networks to essentially the GPT-3, they actually work a slightly different algorithm, but the same basic idea. If you're able to basically use something and encode it in AI, you get compression for free. The core parts of these models, the vectors that they use to basically identify that basically it's almost like a space that you're basically navigating over, are already so optimized and they get better at the compression the more data that you feed them. We have not yet designed a network-centric architecture for artificial intelligence. The reason why I say that is most of our networks are legacy designs from decades old, and one of the core engineering assumptions that they make on this for the packets is that you're never going to be able to predict how big the packets are or where they're going. The reason why this is a really big deal is that for AI, those vectors typically are constant size. And the reason why, and this is getting really in the weeds, but the reason why this is a big deal is that when you basically say we want to create an AI-centric network infrastructure, I'm not saying like some sort of like high-level software-defined network, I'm talking way more low-level in the compression. If you do that, you can make old hardware sing. All you need is essentially to have an AI chip nearby. If you design, like you could take an off-the-shelf phone from like, a decade ago, and if you can have a local AI chip that's made recently, this allows you to do absolute wonders with your network data that will make 5G look like a joke. That's the sort of things that are being enabled, and it's kind of, there's a lot of players that have to realize the different components, but when you see groups like, the Bluetooth thing saying, hey, we can update this with CD audio, that means they're poking in the right direction. It's going to be really cool when people start realizing what's possible to do with these AI compression techniques. It's going to be very exciting.
A technical
Chris,
point, coding
telcos
in
wouldn't like that. Chris, telcos wouldn't like that.
I'd like to burn them all and essentially let's replace them all in a month. It's not that hard. They basically have a monopoly via the spectrum. I could do a whole room on that one with stuff. The telcos have basically sat on our future for long enough.
Telcos are extremely important to U.S. governments and governments around the world. The likelihood of them disappearing anytime soon is extremely remote.
Because they're in bed with the intelligence agencies and we use it for foreign policy. It's basically a foundation that we basically build a lot of foreign alliances on. It's one of these things where it's from a technical basis, they do jack jiddly squat, but from a foreign policy and geopolitics perspective, it is very crucial and important. So this is
first responders and 911 and a lot of other
that's why Verizon builds them for it and says essentially, they have to have like literally the chief of the fire stuff with things for California saying this is ridiculous that we're being throttled on our internet connections when we're trying to literally save basically towers for things. The whole thing that gave telecoms their extreme monopoly powers was the idea saying you have emergency protection provisions. It was almost, frankly, pseudo-military things that basically built all these communication networks to begin with. And the social contract about this is saying you can do that, but if first responders need to get in, like hell, you're going to basically throw us into the consumer
That's why we need an FCC that's not toothless or in bed with the telcos, but that's a whole other topic.
There's a governance one, which is more tricky. But for technical basis, if we want to just basically do spectrum and compression, telcos aren't that hard to replace. If we want to talk about legal and foreign policy and domestic policy and all the sorts of like deals that have been made over decades, I don't know even know how to touch that. It's a mess.
So
that's why I'm so excited.
If feature vector encoding would not be lossless.
That is very true. And there's some philosophical implications about that when you have lossy data. The tricky part is the parts you're throwing away, which parts are important and which parts aren't. This gets into really philosophical territory real quick, and it's a very important point, Eli.
Okay, next up is drone ambulances race to help cardiac arrest victims. They delivered defibrillators.
Oh, that's awesome!
They delivered defibrillators more quickly than EMTs in 64% of tests.
They finally built them. That's fantastic. So what's really awesome about that is you even get like a minute or two faster response rate. It's huge. So emergency medicine is totally different when you basically do drone delivery tech. That's fantastic to hear.
The Security Exchange Commission chairman says banning payment for order is on the table, and that is the absolute nightmare of the Robinhood app, because that's their whole business model, is they sell payment for order. Gary Gensler, the SEC chairman, also tells Barron's that the agency is weighing steps to move more on this market to transparency, and he says it is possible they could ban payment for order flow, which is how Robinhood works. And so as our friend Kieran says in his tweet, Robinhood without payment for order flow is like OnlyFans without porn. That's a great comparison. And Robinhood could be in very deep shit indeed if they pass that. So stay tuned for that. The next one.
Maybe we'll get Anderson Horowitz more on Clubhouse session rooms to basically pump up the investment more before that happens.
The U.S. blocking, this is from Reuters, and it says, U.S. blocking Chinese acquisitions of global tech firms, a red flag. Chinese state-backed tabloid says. Chinese state-backed tabloid The Global Times called U.S. efforts to block cross-border acquisitions of tech companies a red flag that impedes China's tech sector and disrupts the growth of the global tech sector. The outlet, the Global Times, which is published by the People's Daily, China's official newspaper for the ruling Communist Party, argued a recent attempt to block a Chinese purchase of a Korean chip company represents a dangerous precedent for the industry as a whole. If the U.S. succeeds in blocking the deal this time, it could set a very bad precedent for global high-tech mergers and acquisitions, further consolidating the industrial centralization in the U.S. To which the U.S. said, exactly fucking right, buddy. That's exactly the fucking point. Well, America, son, welcome to America. That's how we do it. That's exactly the point. You got it. That's correct. My friends in China, you are correct. That is exactly the entire point. In March, China-based private equity group Wise Road Capital announced it would purchase Korea's Magnachip Semiconductor for $1.4 billion. On Monday, Magnachip said the SEC filing that the U.S. Department of Treasury, in a letter to the company's legal counsel last Friday, said the acquisition posed risks to the national security of the United States. The chip sector has become a hotbed for tensions between the U.S. and China. Both companies are pouring billions into their domestic industries with the recognition that semiconductors are critical to the national security and the economic development. Cross-border acquisitions, which require approval from regulatory bodies, have at times fallen apart because of government objections. In 2018, Qualcomm's planned $44 billion acquisition of Dutch chipmaker NXP Semiconductors failed after Chinese anti-monopoly regulators signaled it would not approve the deal. Ha ha! The tables have turned, Uncle G. You blocked Qualcomm's acquisition of a Dutch company, and now we're blocking your acquisition of a Korea company. Cry me a river, Uncle G.
It's pretty crazy with the supply chain people going, oh, wait, semiconductors, they're a thing, and they're having to crash course on this with regulators at the same time.
Like
with
chess.
Yeah, but what's going to happen is they're literally going up and down the supply chain. It's going, you'll find like these random like lens manufacturers or like a group that makes this very specific brand of laser, and they happen to be like one of only 2 suppliers worldwide that happens to provide the core equipment for like, applied materials that makes the core piece of machine at the heart of an Intel factory or TSMC factory or something, right? And they'll say, by the way, this tiny little company with 20 people, you are basically, it is a national security thing. You're not allowed to sell to anyone else. Your customer lists are now here into this, and then
VLSI
gets them first, right?
Yeah, VLSI out of Netherlands, right? That's what we did to basically block them from having access to ARM Foundry.
And then the thing happened was crazy with ARM with stuff is they're saying the China division of ARM is now not the real ARM, but it is the real ARM, and it's like it's crazy.
Okay,
it's strong ARM.
Still like that name.
Next up here is Krishna sends in this one that Starlink can earn $6 billion with the 12,000 satellites, says Kathy Woods, ARK Invest Space Exploration Technologies, which is SpaceX. Starlink satellite internet constellation will have an addressable market of $6 billion. Okay.
That's actually kind of small considering what it is right now.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's enough to pay for the next round, and it can grow real fast.
So Florina just sent in this one about a video that you have to see. I just twatted it on Twitter at TNATW of a cool concept smartphone with a built-in camera drone by Vivo. And Vivo is one of the big smartphone companies in Asia. And the video, if you go to the Twitter account, it's the most recent tweet. It's a smartphone, and out of the top of the smartphone pops out a little tray, almost like a SIM card tray, but a little bit bigger, like double the size of a SIM card tray. And out of that double-sized SIM card tray pops out a fucking drone that flies away.
Take my money.
It looks so cool.
It looks super cool. And the drone has a camera. So now you can take a selfie of yourself from remotely. You have to see it from the Twitter account. It's truly wild. Thank you for that, Florina. The next one's from Evan.
Generally speaking, the energetics of really small drones gets much more favorable.
It only has to fly for like a minute, and then it's going to basically go out, take a picture, come back, kind of thing. I mean, that could actually, I don't know if the physics work as friendly for being able to fold them that tiny, but man, that'd be great if you could just have.
You ever seen that military grasshopper drone? It's like the size of a cigarette pack or something. It's amazing.
Yeah, I've seen the ones they have at Harvard. They've got like a microelectronics laboratory that makes cool like little robotic bees and stuff. But like it's kind of cool. Is the use case scenario is the drone only needs to run for less than 60 seconds.
I hesitate to bring it up But Japan did when Japan was the first to have camera phones when I was living there in the 90s. And there was a problem momentarily where because it's a train culture and people pack very tightly on trains, where very shady individuals, gentlemen, were using their newfound gadgets
get all sorts of angles
to get really interesting angles on the subway.
It's called Chikan.
It's called Jikan.
Chikan.
Like a pervert.
They have names for it. That's how much of a problem it was.
Yes. Well, it means like a digital pervert, basically. But then they were turning off but now in Japan, when you take a photo, it has to make a phone sound so the people near you know that you just took a photo.
They almost did that in USA.
Even the iPhone makes a sound you can't turn off that goes when you take a photo.
Is it geographic?
My Japanese friend always asks me to get the iPhone outside of Japan for them.
So now I worry what would happen with these little microscopic drones being used to take photos.
That's actually kind of a cool capability if you have because we're thinking about drones, it's almost like it's this big obvious thing that you see from a distance. But I mean, if you make them small enough, it's like I imagine it'd be like buzzing of a gnat type kind of thing, right? But like if you could, instead of lawnmower, if you have the ability to temporarily extend your vision, just like even if you're just doing it a small range away, that could actually be a really interesting thing if that became normalized. Like cell phones were adopted so quickly, and the social implications we're still basically grappling with. So, if they said, "Oh, by the way, drone tech is a cool thing," and by the way, everyone in the world has their own little personal 30-second or 60-second little selfie drone or whatever, what can people do with this? And then, oh shit, we need to redesign everything for this. That'd be crazy.
It's not exactly the same thing, but about a decade ago, I think DARPA was working on putting bugs and cameras on moths.
By the way, if people want to learn more about nanotech, Eli has lots of expertise in this space. He knows lots about small machines that are amazing. If you're ever in some of the rooms with him, he has a lot of expertise in this.
There are people who put the cameras on shoes too, right?
That's what happened in Japan. They were using shoe cameras.
That's crazy, yeah.
So
at the escalator, God.
You guys, but at least you can see the selfie stick if you're walking down the street, and so you don't get like. Can you imagine just like walking into like a drone because somebody you wouldn't be able to even see it, but you'd be
right. My immediate thought with this is community and even community safety. So for instance, if you're walking down the street and you see a racial crime or somebody you can literally take pictures of that person and report that person. So that was my line of thinking with it.
There's also kind of something interesting with the body cam type kind of aspect, where it's like the idea of like having someone on there not for their personal interactions, but it's for later off, showing what happened. Just being able to temporarily go and say, okay, here, I'm just going to basically put something else somewhere else. But rather than being the one cell phone device that basically has your omni everything, having a specialized device that's sole duty is just to observe immediately what's in the area just for a few minutes and then just go back. That actually could be some really interesting social aspects there. So yeah, if it's possible to do technologically, it's not a scenario I've really looked at very much for the battery side. But man, if you could just do that might be a really interesting design space to be in.
So speaking,
and also for reporting crimes, for example, it's a lot safer when it isn't clear that you're the one doing the reporting by holding up a camera.
Oh, and best part, FAA regulations basically say if it's below a certain gram size with things, and they don't give a shit about it, which means that all the people that so all the people that want to basically create a new basically amount of innovative stuff, all of a sudden that small, ultra small drone category, nano drone, starts to look really interesting for putting your best engineers on. And it would give it perfect differentiation, so DJI has essentially not owning your entire market.
Okay.
Potential for something new.
Speaking of porn, so the anti-porn crusaders who went after porn, no, what was the one? OnlyFans. According to Vice, their tech publication called Motherboard, anti-porn crusaders are going after Twitter next. Twitter is one of the last mainstream social media platforms that allows adult content. The National Center of Sexual Exploitation, an organization that has campaigned against pornography and celebrated denying banking services to platforms like Pornhub and OnlyFans, is coming for Twitter, one of the only social media platforms where adult entertainment performers can share their work without being banned. The organization, formerly known as Morality in Media, brought a lawsuit against Twitter earlier this year, accusing the platform of allowing and benefiting from human trafficking. The complaint, on behalf of two men, alleges that Twitter knowingly hosted sexual exploitation material, including child sex abuse material, and allowed human trafficking and the dissemination of child sexual abuse material to continue on its platform, thereby profiting and receiving value from the harmful and exploitative material and traffic it draws. With the court decision in mid-August, the case was allowed to move forward. In the lawsuit, the organization claims that when the men were 13 years old, a sex trafficker manipulated them into sending sexual images of themselves on Snapchat. The videos were then posted to Twitter. They claim that despite their efforts to get the videos removed by contacting Twitter and the police, the tweet stayed up for 9 days and accumulated 167,000 views and 2,223 retweets. For a start, Twitter should comply with its own zero tolerance policy by eliminating all child sexual abuse material from its platform, which it currently doesn't do. In addition, we'd recommend that Twitter eliminate all sexually exploitive images that victimize people. Benjamin Bull, general counsel for the organization, told Motherboard at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Details in its annual report. Social media companies like Twitter and Facebook regularly report child sexual exploitation content on their platforms. Facebook alone reported 20 million instances of child exploitative content in 2020 alone. Holy shit. Twitter reported more than 65,000 in 2020. While the organization lawsuit focuses on one of these instances, the organization's own statement about Twitter are hostile to all forms of sex work and adult entertainment on the platform, where it says it is virtually impossible for a regular Twitter user to avoid sexually explicit content. This is not true. Twitter has controls that allow users to filter out sensitive content, which includes sexual content. Users who upload sensitive content are required to mark it as such, or they risk being suspended or banned. The platform also has rules against non-consensual nudity, the sharing of private information, and child sexual exploitation. So, in the complaint, the organization's lawyers allege that Twitter has become a safe haven and refuge for minor attracted people, aka pedophiles, human traffickers, and discussion of child sexual exploitation as a phenomena, to include trade and dissemination of sexual abuse material. In part, they claim that the platform should be held accountable under the Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act, which makes platforms liable for any sexual speech that could be construed as sexual trafficking under the law.
Okay, I'm just going to say this is going to be weird with things. Okay, we have general adversarial networks. In the near future, AI porn is going to be a thing for every category known to man. And we're not going to have human beings involved because once you got the training data, you can't tell the difference. It's going to happen. I'm really curious at the legal laws that we're crafting during this era and the policies we're crafting out of this knee-jerk response for everything, if those are going to hold up under that scenario in the 10, 20 years from now, kind of thing. It might even be that far out. They're experimenting with it now. I don't know how good they are. I haven't looked at that.
There's no evidence right now that this lawsuit will end in a purge of sex work from Twitter or that porn will be banned as a result. But as we've seen with Pornhub and OnlyFans and other platforms that anti-trafficking, anti-sex worker organizations attack with legal accusations and public pressure, it's worth examining how legal precedents affect the material realities of marginalized communities online. Okay, it's a very long article. I just read the start and the finish of it, but I tweeted it out for those who want to do the deep dive on that.
Hey, Colin, we've been on this, air, whatever, for like 2 hours or whatever we're doing. This breaking news on Apple, I wanted to make you aware of, like, breaking. So I know you know Daniel Ek from Spotify,
sure.
Right? Okay, so he's already tweeted out that. So he's tweeted out that these settlements that Apple is doing don't go far enough, and that and so I could actually read you what he just said. He said, let me just bring it up here.
It doesn't address the anti-competitive nature that they're
right.
Yeah, I can tell you what he's going to say. I haven't even read it, but I know what he would say.
That's exactly what he said. Yeah. And the second bit of news, which I don't necessarily say it's news yet because I haven't seen I tweeted you something on it, which I think relates to it, but So I tweeted that to Tech News, but I saw a tweet from someone who's a follower of a friend of mine, so it's whatever that is worth, that there's a beta test now out for iOS 15, and so people are
Yeah.
starting to look at the features.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that he was complaining about is that Apple is giving you an opt-in thing about like for advertising, but they're only giving you the opt-in to their advertising platform. So like almost like to get so that you can't opt in. Yeah.
I mean, didn't you see this? Didn't you see this happening? I mean,
That's amazing. This is like what happened to the ad block people, where they're like saying, yes, we basically prevent essentially all the advertisers. We protect you. And then essentially they went to an advertising conference. There's like, guess what? We've got installs on everyone's browser and we can basically shove ads to that now. So it's like, haha. This is the game that basically happens when someone says they're going to basically protect you from advertising. It's just basically driving at the market cost. Apple will sell out to like everyone else. They'll just basically command a much higher price and they'll be late to it. But that's how they do everything. Okay. Privacy is something they'll sell out. They just want to make sure they get a $15 billion paycheck for it. Or it's a new division. They'll set all sorts of fun.
Okay. Next one up is from Katerina. Tesla aims to launch full self-driving Computer 2 with the Cybertruck. What the hell is the Computer 2? And
Tesla branding.
Tesla plans to launch a new full self-driving computer with Cybertruck electric pickup truck next year. The updated self-driving hardware could also include new cameras. Tesla's self-driving hardware has been a point of controversy. Back in 2016, Tesla announced that its vehicles going forward will be produced with all the hardware necessary to achieve full self-driving capability with future software updates. It turned out that Tesla was wrong about that. The NVIDIA computer that powered its original self-driving hardware suite didn't have enough computer power, and the automaker ended up upgrading the computer twice. The latest iteration, called the FSD computer, full self-driving computer, is powered by a chip from Tesla's own design. Since the automaker had promised that all its cars had the hardware to achieve self-driving, Tesla upgraded the computer for free when people bought its full self-driving software package. However, this was an issue when Tesla launched its full self-driving subscription package and charged owners $1,500 to get the computer upgrade. There are also some concerns that even the Tesla full self-driving computer isn't enough to achieve true full self-driving capability. At Tesla AI Day yesterday, Tesla CEO Elon Musk was asked whether or not Tesla is reaching the limit of the FSD computer's capability. The CEO reiterated that he still believed the FSD computer will be able to achieve full self-driving. But Tesla always said that it plans to improve the FSD computer, first introduced in 2019. At the event yesterday, Musk referenced Hardware 4, or FSD Computer 2, and linked to the launch of the Cybertruck. The CEO said that the goal of the new hardware will be to enable to increase the safety gap between human drivers and self-driving cars.
I've hosted a room on this for dumb autonomous vehicles, and Musk actually mentioned something very similar, saying there is highway driving, there is essentially off-highway driving. And we're trying to combine them both in the same monster neural net model. The thing that's interesting about this, and it came up in our dumb autonomous room, when we had like some self-driving car people that spent decades on this type of thing, and they said the same thing. I said, highway driving for self-driving cars is a solved problem. It's all the off-highway driving that's the thing. Now, what's interesting is when you look at what separates a highway from essentially a non-highway environment, a lot of that comes down to essentially standardized signage and basically people behaving more predictably. And so when we went through that, we were like, okay, so if we put better signage, would this make self-driving cars easier, more effective? And he's like, oh, hell yeah. So there is a very bizarre policy option that could be done that literally is equivalent to basically replacing signs and spray paint that basically would give everyone magically upgraded capabilities with self-driving cars, but it doesn't involve multiple billions of dollars being put into like experimental AI divisions and 5G networks and all this other crazy shit. And I find it very remarkable that in all of the discussions about this, the thing of we have solved highway driving for autonomous vehicles, and we haven't used that. And the questions of why we haven't used that is a very interesting line of inquiry. And you start finding out about things like Teamsters and other fun things like this, and government committees that basically say, yeah, well, it's ready to deploy out, though. So why aren't we going to do it? I don't know. This is what makes Elon Musk such a special individual. Not as a team, but as an individual. He has a masterful way of repackaging proven tech that has gone abandoned for political reasons and rebranding it as sexy and new with a little bit of sprinkles on top. But the real reasons why a lot of these technologies haven't been deployed have nothing to do with new breakthroughs. That's just the marketing to get people to accept, because we are so psychologically conditioned to say the government can't do anything, to say, well, actually, let's basically take that existing tech and let's basically sell it now. It is remarkable how successful this strategy is, and I wish more people would emulate that part of Elon Musk rather than the look. Here's the sexy marketing demo. It's like that's part of it. But there's the underlying technical foundation. It's fascinating watching how he's dancing around these.
So Apple just filed for a patent for a head-mounted display with an automatic adjustment mechanism, so it could readjust itself and know that it doesn't have a perfect fit and automatically adjust itself to fit your head better.
That's cool.
With a feedback component. Very cool indeed. I just tweeted that one out. Thank you to Dr. Fran for that one. Vinay sends this one in from the Times of India that the Supreme Court of India expresses grave concern over web portals spreading fake news. The Supreme Court on Thursday expressed concern over web portals and YouTube channels for spreading fake news in the absence of something. So I just tweeted that one out.
And now, peasants basically might be revolting. That seems like fake news, I think.
Then Dr. Fran sends in this one from the Boy Genius Report about the 5 best AR and VR toys to help children learn while having fun, called Orboot Mars. It's a VR globe of Mars, so you can play with a kind of miniature version of Mars in VR, as if it was like a globe. It's kind of cool. And there's another one called Red Chimps Educational Flashcards. These VR flashcards. And all kinds of really cool VR games for kids. Very cool. Thank you for that one, Dr. Fran. And then Evan sends in this one that from Yahoo News, a Brazilian viper venom may become tool in fighting against coronavirus, study shows. Brazilian researchers have found that a molecule in the venom of a type of snake inhibited coronavirus reproduction in monkey cells, a possible first step. Oh, Jesus, I can imagine what's going on in Oklahoma next week.
Can you see the headlines being written now about like those crazy scientists?
Vipers.
Yeah, I expect Joe Rogan's going to infect himself with viper venom.
Anything, because you might teach the cells. By the way, just real quick, this is biodiversity in action, folks. This is why we want to protect all the little critters on the earth. You might be able to basically take their innards and basically make cool medicines out of them. We need to keep them alive until our genetics tech gets good enough to clone them.
So Evan sends
keep
this
them
one.
Alive.
Yeah, well, just keep a piece of their DNA in a lab somewhere.
Yeah, but we don't know which parts we need just yet with things. So maximum biodiversity for the medicines.
U.S. government recorded 33,000 phone calls of New York Times writer charged as paid Iranian agent. Oh, shit. New York Times. Oh, New York Times, the one who's constantly writing articles about how bad Amazon is and how bad all the tech companies are and how bad all this. You had a fucking Iranian spy working at the New York fucking Times, you fucking dipshits.
Hello, Apple. I'd like to report a sinking ship.
Holy fuck, New York Times. Every fucking day with you guys. Oh, Amazon's so bad. Somebody got their feelings hurt in the warehouse because somebody said something bad. And oh, Jesus, Google's so atrocious because, oh my God, Google did something that hurt somebody's feelings. And you have a fucking paid Iranian agent working for you.
I just want to know who makes 33,000 phone calls. That's a lot.
That's impressive.
Holy fuck, New York Times. You have an Iranian spy working at your shit show of a publication. U.S. government.
100 phone calls a day. That's 10 per hour.
The U.S. government was surreptitiously listening in on the phone calls of a frequent New York Times opinion contributor who turns out to be an Iranian spy.
No, the reason I brought that out is because an earlier thing that I guess when we had Justin on here or something, somebody, not Justin, but somebody made the point because of Nicholas Kristof. I mean, I don't know, maybe it was you, that he was like the most important, columnist at the New York Times.
Yes.
Apparently, he's now been superseded by this guy.
The Times contributor Kaveh something pleaded not guilty in February after being arrested at his Boston area home on August 25th. Status hearing. A U.S. attorney handling the case, Ian Richardson, said he was preparing to turn over 33,000 audio recordings of this gentleman. On August 27th, letter said that in addition to the audio recordings, the government is turning over Internal Revenue Service, health insurance, and banking records The gentleman told...
They got him fingered.
Yeah. I have been better things to do than listen to my own calls. So he himself told a publication called the Allgemeiner in an email that the recordings of him, the sum of all of my phone calls over 13 years, maybe even longer, I have better things to do than to listen to my own calls to my family, friends, etc., a giant waste of time. The federal judge of the case, Edward Corman, praised the gentleman, Afrasiabi, and admonished the government for dragging out discovery in the case. For a pro se defendant, you're being terrific, the judge told Afrasiabi. I have an assistant U.S. attorney who is dragging out discovery to no end. Corman said Afrasiabi faced a worst-case scenario maximum sentence of 5 years, a little over 4 years with time off for good behavior. Afrasiabi's standby lawyer said the prospect of Afrasiabi, who is a permanent resident of the U.S., could be deported to Iran if convicted, terrifies me and Dr. Afrasiabi. Corman wondered aloud, do we actually, given our view of the Iranian government, deport people to Iran? The a little over 4 years comment about a potential sentence was a positive sign for Afrasiabi. The prosecutor's press release when the criminal complaint against Afrasiabi was unsealed said, if convicted of both charged offenses, Afrasiabi faces a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison. The judge lifted the court-ordered curfew that had applied. He's not going to skip to Iran. If he wanted to run elsewhere, he would have done so already. Judge Corman also cautioned Afrasiabi against incautious remarks when Afrasiabi started talking about how he had participated in Track 2 diplomacy under the auspices of the United Nations Association of the USA. Corman cut him off. Half of the things you say are self-incriminating, the judge told you. The judge said,
oh my,
you should be careful because everything you say can be used against you. The judge is telling you. Prosecutors say he was paid approximately $265,000 by the Iranian UN mission since 2007 and also received health insurance benefits. Afrasiabi has acknowledged that the Allgemeiner that he received the money. So he's admitting that he took the money from Iran. The New York Times, which was publishing frequent op-eds and even letters to the editor from Afrasiabi denouncing Israel's neo-colonial expansionism and the growing apartheid-like cantonization of web areas manned by some 700 Israeli checkpoints, not to mention alarming signs of growing violence by vigilante Jewish settlers against the Palestinians, has yet to publish a word about the criminal case against Afrasiabi.
13 years?
And the New York Times has not even addressed the fact that this has happened. They've not even...
All right, so there's multiple things on this. 13 years, just real quick. When the judge is saying, like, admonishing the prosecution, saying you dragged out discovery, okay, two parts to this. Did they start discovery 13 years ago? In that case, holy frack, yes. But then the other part is like, maybe they started only 2 or 3 years ago and they said, this guy seems awfully pro-Iran or whatever. That would be one thing. But then the question is, where did essentially the prior years of telephone recordings basically come from? And then we get to the uncomfortable thing of, wait, the government's recording all what the journalists say, essentially, because something that they flip a magic switch and then all of a sudden it's like, well, yes, you're a state security issue, so all of your stuff comes out. There's actually a much more interesting set of discussions that can be had there, where New York Times could turn that around if they wanted to say, yes, but it's a larger issue, but they don't have the balls to do that. They're going to go along with the current systems going, oopsies, and they're going to shovel this one out the back door.
This is like when I lose something, Chris, and I'm like, man, I wish there was a recording of me actually losing it. And I say to myself, like, I actually know there is, but no one will ever admit it.
So Afrasiabi has insisted that the articles he wrote were not written as an Iranian propaganda, but as an agent of peace committed to U.S.-Iran reconciliation and peace and dialogue.
That was on payroll.
I never wrote any book or article at the instruction of the Iran mission, nor did I ever, although they paid me $275,000, for nothing, basically. Nor did I ever waver from my own independent standards in my publications. At times, my writings were at variance with Iran's positions.
He's defending himself like a journalist, not like someone that's under legal prosecution for nation-state security stuff. That is remarkable.
The New York Times failed to disclose to its readers that Afrasiabi was being paid by the Iranian UN mission, and it hasn't appended notes to his articles, which remain readily available on their website. While simultaneously, it has, however, provided energetic, breathless front-page coverage of other foreign agents' cases involved allies of former President Trump, but they've not yet provided any coverage or even updates to the articles that he has written.
How many others do they have of here essentially on the publications? Just another one talking about shitty journalism thing. This was something that people caught out. I think it was Washington Post. I think was the one that did this. And you check me on this one of things. But if I remember right, they basically, when it became politically, we were going to be friends with China, and then a meeting in January went bad. And all of a sudden, immediately, within a week, all of a sudden, lab leak hypothesis became politically acceptable to talk about. It was removed from the censorship list. It was no longer an anti-vaxxer conspiracy. Suddenly, it's politically acceptable because it opens up all sorts of political stuff. But what was fascinating was that some of the publications, like Washington Post, went back into their archive and altered the headlines of lab leak theory coverage originally to make it look like their coverage of it was different in the archive. This is one of those subtle scrubbings of history, and when you watch it happen in real time, it's astounding because it really makes you wonder how much other stuff have they been scrubbing that Lori didn't catch them as a thing. Like it's the journalistic standards are I won't say non-existent, but it's shocking how low the bar is.
Okay. So the next one up is from Evan. Solar domes could desalinate seawater at commercial scale. Thank God, we need it. And
Tyler, just quickly on the last point, all of this makes Benjamin Netanyahu right, because he curtailed a lot of intelligence sharing with the US because he said that he do not trust Biden administration. And the second point which they made last year was that US.
Well, he would know because he had all their phones hacked with Pegasus.
It was mutual.
Hey, Tyler, also in breaking news right now,
Yep.
There's been an announcement that YouTube Music now has 50 million paying subscribers. And I think the only question I hear kind of going on in my friends who follow this industry very closely is how they're quantifying 50 million, because some of these services, like Netflix, if they tell you they've got 50 million, that's 50 million household accounts. It may actually have 200 million people, watching. But I understand Spotify and Apple Music, they actually divide that. So you have a family account on those services, and you've got 4 people on your family account. They count all 4. Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, it's still a big number.
Okay. So the next one,
and I sent it out to you, by the way.
Okay. The next one is Amazon luxury stores are headed to Europe. Amazon's taking its luxury stores platform into the ultra-competitive European market in November, according to industry sources. The next one up is from Demolaire. Bjarke Ingels, who's one of the world's best creative architects and he's out of Denmark. And he's absolutely brilliant. I would say he's my favorite architect. And the headline reads that he teams up with American billionaire to plan utopian city of the future. Well, that's my kind of headline right there. The vision for a new city in America, Telosa. Open air and inclusive, 3 words that describe a new city designed by Bjarke Ingels for American entrepreneur Mark Lohr, announced yesterday, September 1st, on social media. Telosa will eventually house 5 million people and is planned to be built from scratch on a 150,000-acre site in the U.S., which the team is currently scouting. The Telosa vision is to create a new city in America that sets a global standard for urban living, expands human potential,
builds,
and becomes a blueprint for future generations. An equitable future where citizens have a stake in the city's land. Telosa was first conceived by Lohr in response to rising inequities or inequality in the U.S. His idea is based on the socio-economic model of equitism, which, unlike capitalism, is based on community ownership. Capitalism has been an incredible economic model, but there are significant flaws, especially around income and wealth inequality. Many of these flaws are the result of the land ownership model that America was built on, says Lohr on the Telosa website. What if the land had been owned by a community endowment? What if you took the land appreciation and gave it back to the community since they created at its value? At first glance, it seems impossible to turn back the clock and have a do-over. The land was claimed, but there's plenty of land left. What if we had a clean slate to demonstrate this new model? Lord continues,
Hey.
we have a chance to prove a new model for society that offers people a higher quality of life and greater opportunity. When I look out 30 years from now, I imagine equitism serving as a blueprint for other cities and even the world. And Tolosa being a place of pride for all people who live there. Lord's plan is for all Tolosa land to be donated to a community endowment, which will be used to increase the land values to fund enhanced public services such as education, housing, health, jobs, and retraining.
This is setting a lot of buzzwords. By the way, if you PTR, this is one of their land plans. You notice it looks kind of Barcelona-ish type kind of thing with the layouts there. Just a quick, I'm looking through the Tolosa website things. One of the things you'll notice is that some of the architectural decisions they're making on this are actually look very similar to some of Google's when they were talking about taking over Toronto. The supply chain on this, I'm seeing a lot of wooden construction buildings. By the way, that's a really exciting thing happening in construction where they're having automated robots basically building these factory things and shipping out the buildings and assembling them on site. I'm seeing things here on like there's some tensile architecture things here. There's some thermal design going on. Regardless of essentially of like however they get this project off the ground or not, they actually bother to actually study supply chain and actually look at what to actually build. They actually did some work on this, and actually there's some good concepts here. There's also an earlier concept when they're talking about equitism. There's an earlier set of concepts called Georgism or Henry George. He was basically an economist turn of the century. Einstein called him one of the smartest guys he knew, which is quite an endorsement. But it was something that was very popular, and one of the big things about it was the idea of a land tax and the idea that only capital improvements to land was to be the things essentially that people actually have as value. The reason why this is relevant is when we're talking about local community banks or state-based banks or city-based banks, is the difference is that the ownership of the land actually is with the people there rather than basically a Wall Street bank that basically like a BlackRock type kind of scenario, or landholders that do not live in the communities they're basically improving. Because what ends up happening is if you have everything renting, all of the wealth ends up flowing out of the community elsewhere. So there's a lot of ideas going on here. The real question is who's going to pay for it. If you have enough of a billionaire support to say, I'm going to bankroll this, and they actually follow through, once these models are established, many civic governments will basically do copy and paste templates of things if they can at least point to something working somewhere. So there's a long historical precedent of saying, I won't say utopian cities being like the ultimate success story, but there are aspects of basically saying, hey, we built it, this part worked, this part didn't, and then aspects of that get copied elsewhere. So anyways, there's some from architectural standpoint, there's some really good stuff in here.
They say people will move in by 2030, although they're still looking for the location.
Yeah,
it is possible to meet those benchmarks. If you're building new builds, the construction technology does exist to build that quickly, but you need to have the permission of the group so you're not stuck in regulatory.
5 million people. That's a decent sized city.
Yeah. It's part of the architectural thesis for what will the new millennial actually live like, and including all of the things that Chris said, which was well said as well. There's the political standpoint as well for who wants what. So I kind of tied the thought into Silicon Valley having its own stock exchange that you spoke about last week, I think. So it's all of that, what is equity and who owns what, and how are we going to share all of the whole pie, basically.
There is an appetite for charter cities and some regulatory things happening in some desert states that essentially are more open to essentially more experimentation. We see what China's able to do when they build their cities.
How about they build it on an Indian reservation, and after it's completed, the Indians come in and massacre everybody and say thank you, and this is karma.
Well, not massacre. it's yeah, but
there is now that's equity.
It's called reappropriation.
Thank you for the paying us back and building this on our land.
Many of the Indian groups actually have unique regulatory basically authority because they basically have they got such shitty land with things and a lot of the things historically. Many groups actually have unique legal capabilities, which actually can be very, very important when you're looking at doing new technologies, especially with built up infrastructure. And many indigenous groups worldwide have arrived at somewhat similar, unique arrangements. Not all of it was necessarily better or worse, but because it's different, it allows different patterns to basically merge. And some of them have leveraged them for things like casinos or hotels, but you could actually do charter cities in a very unique fashion.
That's why I'm saying, I bet it's on their list of considerations.
One last thing to throw out here with things is people talk about whether or not we fix the current pattern versus essentially creating a new one. One of the ideas that emerges is the idea of, well, it's so complicated just describing what currently exists. I will say this as someone that basically spends way too much time studying this, is that the amount of complexity for starting something new is less than explaining the bullshit that we have to basically do with our current system. It's not necessarily whether or not it's better or worse. It's just the matter of the new patterns are simpler to articulate. And when you can basically outline everything from the food, water, shelter to essentially the thermal design to essentially who's going to own what, you could actually outline the entire plan for that new city with things on 10 pieces of paper. Good luck explaining even the healthcare system for USA under that kind of thing. But you could say, like, here's the clinic structure. Here's exactly who's going to run it. Okay, cool. That next bullet point. There are advantages to new builds, even if they don't always be successful. Just trying it actually ends up being very, very useful to see it as a reference model. So, anyways, yeah, this is cool. I'm very happy when you have these articles in here, Tyler.
Considering it's like privately owned as well, there's a lot of less bureaucracy that will be attached possibly as well.
Okay, next one is from Sundamini Kumar. That from Indian Express, smartphone sales grow globally by 10%. Xiaomi beats Apple for number of smartphones sold. The next one is from Verdhan Sharma. This is from Economic Times of India. Why mental health startups haven't yet taken off in India. And they summarize by saying it's very easy to pay for something like diabetes, which is conclusive and quantifiable. A venture capitalist from India said there's a natural societal appetite to be dismissive of something like mental health. So I think that it's not the easiest to monetize. So it's still stigmatized. There's your answer. Next article. Verdhan also sends in this one that India is fast becoming the global ransomware capital, like the center, the capital of ransomware, according to Economic Times, India Times. And Gareth sends in this one that the SEC boss tells the EU Parliament that crypto and fintech could be as disruptive as the internet itself. Sharok sends in this one from Decrypt that Cardano hits new all-time high as Charles Hoskinson, who's the creator of Cardano, fights off critics. Cardano's native token, the ADA or ADA, has hit a new all-time high just a week after overtaking Tether as the industry's third largest cryptocurrency. And then Cheryl sends in this one from Nikkei Japan that whereas Japanese automakers lag Tesla and Volkswagen in electric vehicle growth sales, they maintain a bonus in vital EV know-how with Toyota Motor rating worldwide primarily first. Toyota Motor rating first worldwide primarily based on the significance of its U.S. patents. New analyst finds that Toyota has all the patents for EVs, but they lag behind Tesla in the actual production of EVs. But hopefully they'll catch up. And then Verdana sends in this one from Economic Times of India. Indian startups go vocal on App Store policies again. And indeed, they're now following Korea to get away from the 30% tax, and they will. Next one from Nulormi from BBC that the Hurricane Ida has now reached New York, and New York declares a state of emergency over brutal flooding. The mayor said the city is enduring a historic weather event that will happen every year for the next 100 years, as New Jersey also declares an emergency.
As someone who grew up there, I'm going to tell you it is, at least at this point, an historic weather event. And I know you tweeted something out from Dr. Fran earlier, and like the death count's even higher than that article. It keeps rising every hour. They keep finding bodies.
Oy.
Yeah. So the next one is from Sundamini Kumar that Thailand has some bad news for Google and Facebook and other tech firms. Thailand on Wednesday will start collecting a VAT tax, value-add tax from foreign technology companies and expects to raise at least 5 billion baht, $154 million. Pay up, Google.
Oh, come on. That's like Tuesday.
Yeah. for the tech companies, for Thailand, that's a big party. We're gonna that can buy a whole lot of sweet and sour rolls over here, So yeah, Thailand on Wednesday will start collecting VAT from foreign technology companies and expects to raise at least 5 billion baht, 154 million in additional revenue each year. A senior official said foreign platforms providing electronic services in Thailand will have to register for VAT payments. Senior finance ministry officials told Reuters. So far, 69 companies have registered from a target of 100, according to Ecnity. The companies are divided into 5 categories. Companies with revenue of over 1.8 million baht have to pay a 7% VAT, which has to be paid every month. the ministry's target of 5 billion baht of additional revenue is a minimum because the goal was derived before the pandemic. Thailand collects about 800 billion baht annually from VAT.
Yeah, so it's like they have $200 billion in exports with things. So this is only going to be like a small thing, but yeah, this is just taxation.
Yeah, so I like it. Next up, voice chat is coming to Roblox. As one of the front runners in the race to build the metaverse, Roblox is thinking ahead to what virtual worlds really need. And while the platform has no shortage of growth on its own current path, as of July, it boasted 47 million daily active users. It's looking to chart a course towards deeper, richer virtual experiences that will keep people coming back for years to come. To that end, Roblox is taking careful but decisive steps towards weaving voice chat into the platform's core experience. The first move, inviting a group of trusted developers to explore how they can integrate proximity-based audio into the wildly popular experience that beat the heart of the platform, from chill vaporware vibe games to pulling off kickflips in a van-sponsored skate park. With spatial audio,
to insults to your mother and basically confidence things and all the wonderful, joyful communities that we know from groups like League of Legends, and basically talking about how the that toxicity aspect, censorship, then just kids based. They are playing with fire right there. Sony tried this essentially just like 2 years ago with their basically launching a new PlayStation Home thing with proximity-based audio. The idea is you have avatars just run around, and then while you're waiting for playing a game, you can basically hang out with other people that really enjoy the games. Sony turned the feature off after 2 weeks with things because what they found out is that basically the only thing that people had to share with each other was just insult after insult after insult. And no matter where you went in the game, people were just basically just being absolute dicks to each other. Maybe Roblox having the happy smiles on all the characters will make it different. I mean, Minecraft has a version of this, but the reason they have it isn't because of proximity. It's because they have such extreme server control. And that's I don't know how they're going to pull that with like a metaverse context where everyone's in everyone else's world. But they're just saying we want to become a next social network. Which, I mean, valuations are great, but yeah, they're going to have some extra challenges on that than some of the other platforms.
So, mysterious fever kills at least 40 children within a week in India. Schools are ordered to close in the affected areas as the unidentified disease infected children. From The Independent from the UK. Thank you, Nalormi, for that very concerning development. Let's keep a close eye on that one. And then Verdane sends in this one, that startup dreams take wing and as India sees one seed round every day. They are super excited about tech in India now. Everyone's getting funded every day, new unicorns every week. Peter Thiel files plans to build a luxury lodge in New Zealand. Plans for the complex show several inconspicuous buildings that blend into the landscape on the shores of the picturesque Lake Wanaka, which this beautiful estate is cleverly designed so it can't be viewed from a satellite. It's built into the earth, kind of like a glorious hobbit house. And Jane Wong from Hong Kong already told us about that. And there we go. Let's pause it there, shall we? Heyman, I think, wants to do a tech room of some kind. MedTech news, perhaps? Is it already open?
I think in 12 minutes time, isn't it?
It started in 6, didn't it?
Yeah.
It started 12 minutes ago, no?
Yeah. Hold on. It started 18 minutes ago. That's right.
Is it open, though?
It started at 6.
Yes, it's open already.
I don't see it. Okay. So it's called the...
Just click on
Respiratory Care Insights.
On top.
Yeah, click on the title of the room.
Yep. And then click onto the event.
And then you'll see it right there. And you can click the join button there, and we will see you there. Yes. Thank you, everybody, for another fantastic tech news around the world. We'll see you tomorrow at the same time zone on Saturday.
Yes.
All right,
everyone.
Have a great weekend.
It's a special edition for respiratory
care.